Volume 1, Chapter 25, 25, Strange Tasks and Suspicions. 3 days have passed like this. During this time, the couple was very tired, and their mood was no longer as rosy as at the beginning of the journey. They stayed awake every night, afraid of the night creatures. They didn't even dare to light a fire. In the afternoon, they went deeper into the forest, leaving some time for a short nap and rest. These days, they had encountered many monsters in this mysterious forest. They had encountered mirage rabbits like their first opponent a couple of times. Knowing the characteristics of these rabbits, they were able to kill them with little effort. Also among the monsters were the spiked wolves, as the system called them. Their bodies were covered with long spikes. They were fast and shot their spikes from time to time. The battle with these wolves, as well as with their first opponent, was not without injuries and some panic. Thanks to the prompts of the system, which arrived on time, they were able to get rid of them with great difficulty. From the second day, the system began to issue unusual tasks. Idan was tasked with butchering the corpses of 20 monsters. The reward for completing this task included a certain amount of local currency and system points. Arabel was given the task of learning how to cook 10 different dishes from the carcasses of the monsters they killed. The reward for this was also in the form of local currency and system points. Idan did not object to such an assignment, but Arabel was surprised at first, and then confused, realizing that she had never cooked in her entire life. "Does the system really want to make a housewife out of me?" she asked Idan after a long silence. "Maybe," Idan replied without hesitation. Arabel stared at him, speechless. Unlike Idan, Arabel began to wonder what the system really wanted. After all, it's called the Supreme Wife System. What should a wife be like according to the system, especially the one with the title of Supreme? Should a wife cook, and what other duties are assigned to her? Have children, educate them, support her husband, to wash and cook? No, Arabel thought in panic. She wasn't prepared for this turn of events. Would the system really start giving her only such tasks? Just the fact that the system had instructed her to prepare the dishes made her uneasy. And Idan's assignments were also related to his responsibilities as a husband, to provide food for the family. To do this, he needed to learn how to butcher corpses. And then Arabel had an idea. Perhaps our level rise depends on fulfilling the responsibilities that correspond to our role, which the system has defined for us. In order to become stronger, she needed to take on the role of a wife, and Idan needed to take on the role of a husband. This could explain why the system remained silent. At that time, the relationship between Idan and Arabel was only superficial and represented a mutually beneficial cooperation. The system understood that they did not yet fit the role of husband and wife. Idan only made an offer, and Arabel accepted it. They were not married yet, and neither were ready for this step. Everything that happened was the work of the system, and their relationship was also connected to the system. Therefore, their relationship has not progressed far these days. They were together only because of the system. However, on reflection, Arabel realized that she could fulfill her duties as a wife without improving their relationship. Before sharing her thoughts with Idan, she decided to test her guesses and began to complete the tasks of the system. In recent days, Idan had been diligently studying the butchering of corpses. And Arabel finally took out the kitchen set she received as a reward from the system from her storage and began her first attempts at cooking. The first results of both were far from perfect. None of them expected that the system would evaluate their work and reject all their initiatives. For all the attempts to divide the corpses, Idan received an unsatisfactory rating from the system, and his advice was simple: work harder. Arabel also tried to cook, but her first courses often turned out to be unsuccessful. Some burned, others were oversalted, and others overcooked or undercooked. The system was stricter with her than with Idan, and constantly pointed out her mistakes without considering the emotions she was experiencing at that moment. Because of this, the couple's mood has been depressed over the past 3 days. And now it was their 4th day in this world. As usual, they did not sleep all night, and moving deeper, they were no longer the inexperienced beginners they were on the first day. During these couple of days, they began to get used to it and behave more confidently, but because of the task of the system, their mood remained gloomy. Soon they came to a small, clear clearing. Admiring her beauty, the couple began to cross the clearing. Everything was quiet and peaceful, but when they reached the middle, they noticed that a couple of people came out of the forest right in front of them. When the couple saw the silhouettes of two people, they were surprised. But when they took a closer look, they fell into a state of deep shock. This couple was wearing the same clothes as them, their faces were identical to their own, and they were walking in the same rhythm. Idan and Arabel stared in amazement at the people who looked like them, who stopped a few meters short of them and began to study them with the same expression of shock on their faces. Idan and Arabel felt as if they were looking at themselves in a mirror. But what struck them the most was the expressions on the faces of their doppelgangers. They were calm at first, but when they stopped, their faces contorted in shock, just like theirs. "Who are you?" asked Arabel, looking at their doppelgangers. In response, her doppelganger only moved his lips, but there was no voice. Arabel immediately realized that her doppelganger was imitating her movements and facial expressions, but unlike her, she couldn't speak. She mentally commanded Idan to step back, and they both took a step back. However, their doppelgangers, instead of repeating their movement, stepped forward, approaching them. Arabel looked at Idan in surprise, as if wanting to say something, and averted her eyes from her double. As she did so, a sinister smile appeared on her doppelganger's face, which Idan immediately noticed. Idan immediately realized that their doppelganger had ill intentions. He immediately warned Arabel about this, and the two of them, without waiting for the attack, drew their swords and rushed into battle. The doppelgangers, copying their movements, also drew their swords and rushed towards them. While the couple and their doppelgangers engaged in a confrontation, a silhouette was quietly watching them from a branch of a large tree. The observer's clothes were similar to those of adventurers, like Idan and Arabel. He had a hood on his head that hid most of his face, which was wearing a fancy mask. Watching the pair's battle with their doppelgangers, the silhouette shook his head sadly. He had already foreseen the outcome of this confrontation. If this continues, the couple will not escape a sad fate. He got up and was about to leave when a small voice sounded in his head, like a little girl's whisper. "Aren't you going to help them?" "No," he replied. "But Nemo, I have a strange feeling when I look at them. I can't explain it exactly, but it seems to me that we have to help them. If we leave them in this position, they won't survive. You defeated your doppelganger with great difficulty, and they look like newbies, and they can't handle them without our help." The unexpected request from that voice in his head surprised the guy the voice called Nemo. He stopped and turned his attention back to the battle that was about to change. Having made up his mind, he took off a small, round metal shield from his back and attached it to his right arm, which was completely metal. And he waited for the right moment to intervene in the battle. Chapter 26. Despair and salvation. Very little time has passed since the beginning of the confrontation between the couple and their doppelgangers, but they have already begun to realize that if this continues, they will lose. They hadn't slept or rested much in recent days, and they were mentally exhausted, and it played against them. Unlike them, their doppelgangers acted like machines, showing no signs of fatigue. They perfectly copied their movements and could easily resist them. When the couple wanted to retreat, the doppelgangers would immediately block their path, blocking their escape route. They moved and intercepted all their attempts to escape. The couple began to panic, and their pace faltered. They started missing punches and failed to dodge several times, getting slashed. The doppelgangers, seeing how the couple began to panic, finally changed their expressions and began to smile eerily. For Idan and Arabel, that smile was like a reminder of the first rabbit they killed. It seemed to them that all the monsters of this forest loved to play with their prey, and these doppelgangers were no exception. However, what really surprised Idan and Arabel was the system's silence. When the couple realized they couldn't win, they immediately turned to the system for help, but it didn't say a word. It was as if she had given up on them too. Despair began to grip Idan and Arabel. They didn't want to die, but they weren't going to give up until the very end. Gritting her teeth, Arabel tried to turn the situation around and made a desperate attempt to attack Idan's doppelganger. At this time, Idan asked the system to transfer his stats to her. But even this request was not answered by the system, and what they were counting on, as in previous battles, did not work. Idan's doppelganger, being in excellent shape, easily dodged Arabel's blow. After he avoided the attack, he kicked Arabel in the side, sending her flying towards Idan, who was distracting Arabel's doppelganger at the time. Arabel suddenly appeared, knocking Idan off his feet, and they both rolled on the ground. In surprise, Idan dropped his sword, but when he tried to pick it up, his doppelganger was already standing next to him and stepped on the sword, not allowing him to reach it. Then he kicked Idan in the face with all his might. The blow was so strong that Idan almost lost consciousness. For a moment, his vision blurred, and he felt a sharp pain on his right cheek and a metallic taste in his mouth. Several of his teeth were knocked out. Arabel's doppelganger also appeared next to her and hit her on the head. The blow was so powerful that it almost knocked off the ghost mask she was wearing. The couple was defeated, and both of them couldn't find the strength to stand up, let alone face them. They were on the verge of despair and anxiously awaited the next actions of their doppelgangers, not noticing how the clearing began to fill with fog. It was only when the doppelgangers turned away from them and noticed the fog that Idan and Arabel noticed it too. The fog, as if realizing that it had been noticed, rapidly filled the entire clearing, and its density became so dense that Idan and Arabel, lying down, could only see the silhouettes of their doppelgangers standing side by side. These silhouettes began to move, and soon they disappeared from sight, disappearing into the mist. Idan and Arabel could only hear the sounds of the battle taking place in the fog. Then they heard explosions and a crackling sound, reminiscent of the crackle of lightning from movies and videos. After a while, something round fell in front of Idan and, with a crack, pierced into the ground. Looking closer, Idan recognized the object as a round shield that crackled with sparks. When the shield pierced into the ground, the sparks disappeared, revealing a round shield with sharp edges soaked in blood. At that moment, next to the shield, with a thud, something round fell to the ground and rolled towards Idan. Idan, recognizing the head of his doppelganger in this object, crawled back from it in fear and bumped into Arabel, who had only recently regained consciousness after hitting her doppelganger on the head. She also flinched in fright when she saw Idan's head in front of her, and hit the real Idan with all her might, thinking that he was his doppelganger and the head belonged to the real Idan. It was only when Idan spoke to her through a mental link that she stopped. She was embarrassed, but she didn't apologize for it. They couldn't see anything because of the fog. The sounds of fighting stopped from the moment the round shield fell in front of Idan. The fog began to dissipate, revealing a terrible picture in front of the couple. The bodies of the doppelgangers of this couple were in terrible condition. Idan's doppelganger was missing not only his head, but also both his arms. Arabel's doppelganger lost his right arm, and her body was split in two. The whole clearing was covered in blood. In the midst of this chaos, there was a man wearing clothes very similar to those of adventurers. His face was hidden not only by a hood, but also by a bizarre mask that seemed to have a life of its own and was constantly changing its shape. In his left hand, he held a short sword soaked in the doppelganger's blood. When the fog had completely cleared, the stranger raised his right hand, hidden under his cloak. At that moment, the shield stuck in front of Idan trembled. Then it flew out and flew at the stranger with great speed, attaching itself to his right arm with a thud. Idan and Arabel realized that this man in adventurer's clothes had saved their lives, but they didn't know if he was friend or foe. Pulling himself together, Idan decided to thank him. "Thank you for saving our lives. If it weren't for you, we would have died today. I do not know how to thank you for saving our lives, but I promise that we will do it," said Idan with sincere gratitude. "I am also very grateful to you for saving our lives. I promise that we will definitely repay you for this together." Arabel echoed, also with sincere faith that they will fulfill their promise. The stranger, having heard the words of gratitude, did not answer anything. He returned his sword to its scabbard and was about to leave, but suddenly stopped, turned around and motioned with his left hand for them to follow him. Idan and Arabel exchanged glances, spoke quickly, and, lifting their wounded bodies, followed the stranger. At that moment, they could not have imagined that this meeting would become one of the most important memories in their lives. Chapter 27. A group of adventurers. The couple was still in a state of shock from the recent incident. The scene they witnessed kept coming back to their minds. This bloodbath, where their doppelgangers became victims, deeply wounded their consciousness. It was especially hard to see an almost identical corpse. Overcoming fatigue and pain, they followed the stranger in silence. They had no idea what lay ahead, but they had no choice but to take the risk and trust him. Soon, they came to a small open space where the camp was set up. There were 3 more people in adventurers' clothes waiting for them, 2 women and 1 man. Noticing Nemo and the couple, a woman with long green hair and pointed ears came out to meet them. She was dressed in adventurers' clothes in shades of green, as was her hair. Her expression was worried, but when she saw that the stranger was okay, she calmed down. Then she turned her gaze to Idan and Arabel. The woman's gaze was wary and laced with suspicion. Idan and Arabel felt as if their bodies were bound by a mysterious force, not allowing them to move. The stranger remained silent all this time. Approaching the woman, he just slapped her on the shoulder and shook his head. Only then did she calm down, and Idan and Arabel breathed a sigh of relief when the pressure eased. "Who are you?" the stranger asked. At that moment, 2 more people appeared behind her. Both had short brown hair, and unlike the woman with green hair, they looked like ordinary people. "My name is Idan, and this is my childhood friend and—" Idan suddenly stopped, as if hesitating to say something important. "And?" the woman in green asked. "And she's my fiancé, Arabel," Idan said in embarrassment. Arabel blushed when she heard Idan call her his fiancé, but she quickly regained her composure. This did not escape the attentive eyes of the woman in green. It was obvious that they were both embarrassed to admit it, but it seemed like it was true. "A few days ago, we found ourselves inside this forest, and since then we have been wandering in search of a way out. We don't know where we are, and we've run into our doppelgangers. If it wasn't for him, we would have died. We are very grateful to him for saving us. It was he who brought us here." Idan continued his story. He had already guessed that this stranger was part of this group. The woman did not immediately believe their words that they were inside this forest. There has never been a case where someone found themselves in one of the forbidden places after they were swallowed up. However, after seeing their serious condition, their trembling body, and the wounds on their bodies, she believed that Nemo had saved the couple and brought them here himself. Usually, her youngest is not interested in many people, so she decided to believe them. "My name is Eulalia. The guy who saved you is my youngest. His name is Nemo. And this is Ella and Radic." A woman named Eulalia introduced everyone else. "I see that you are injured and very tired. Rest for a while, and then we will discuss our business," Eulalia said, inviting them to her camp. Idan and Arabel were happy to accept this offer. However, before agreeing, they exchanged thoughts and decided to take turns resting. Although the group seemed friendly, and one of them saved their lives, they didn't want to let their guard down among strangers. They were led to a vacant lot and offered blankets to rest on. The couple happily agreed. They didn't want to show that they had spatial storage until they were convinced of the good intentions of the locals. Besides, they didn't know how valuable such a storage facility was in the eyes of the local population. As agreed, Arabel went to bed first to rest and sleep, while Idan stayed by her side on guard. She was so tired these days that she didn't object to his decision, but was grateful for his concern. The group immediately noticed this, but did not bother them. They also understood that the couple did not fully trust them. Arabel, exhausted, fell asleep quickly. Idan sat down next to her and waited. He was also feeling mentally tired, and his whole body ached from his wounds. However, he tried to hold on, nodded off from time to time, and almost fell asleep. Eulalia and the others noticed how the guy fell asleep, then woke up and shook his head, trying to shake off sleep. Unable to bear to see his torment anymore, Eulalia went up to him and cast some kind of spell. Defenseless, Idan found himself under the influence of magic, sinking into a deep sleep. Snorting, Eulalia returned to her seat. Ella and Radic exchanged glances and smiled. Although Eulalia looked strict, she was caring and empathetic inside. They understood that she couldn't stand it and used sleep magic to ease the guy's suffering. Nemo, meanwhile, silently found his place, sat down and began to clean his sword and shield from blood, and then checked his equipment. When he finished checking his equipment, Eulalia came up to him and sat down next to him. She then cast a spell by shining a beam at his forehead. Nemo did not resist and calmly accepted this ray. "Okay, now tell me what happened." He heard Eulalia's voice in his head. The spell she used was a telepathy spell, allowing her to establish a mental connection with a person and communicate without words. Nemo gave a detailed account of what had happened. He described how, while scouting, he came across a couple and followed them. He then told how the couple had encountered their doppelgangers and that he wanted to leave them for dead. If it wasn't for Izzy's request, he would have done just that. "Are you saying that Izzy saw something in them?" asked Eulalia in surprise. Nemo confirmed her words. Eulalia looked at the couple with interest and started asking questions about who they really were. If they were able to attract Izzy's attention, then they are not just adventurers as they seem at first glance. After all, to attract the attention of the spirit dwelling in Nemo is a real achievement. As an elf, Eulalia sincerely respected spirits, and the news that this seemingly ordinary couple was able to attract the attention of a spirit deeply impressed her. Evening came, and the sun began to sink below the horizon. The group decided to postpone their business and spend the night here to give the couple a break. A big role in this decision was played by what Eulalia learned from Nemo. She wanted to wait for Idan and Arabel to wake up and talk to them. They built a bonfire and started cooking dinner. Unlike Idan and Arabel, they weren't afraid of the monsters living in this part of the forest, so the atmosphere was relaxed. Soon, their surroundings were filled with the pleasant aroma of cooked food. Idan and Arabel, awakened by the alluring scent, felt their stomachs growl with hunger. Seeing the couple wake up and hearing their stomachs rumble, the group laughed merrily. When Idan woke up, he realized that he had fallen asleep himself. He did not remember how Eulalia had cast a spell on him, and now he felt guilty for not being able to fulfill his role and succumbing to sleep. "Come and join us," the young girl Ella suggested. "Yes, let's join in." A guy named Radix supported her. Idan and Arabel, glancing at each other, decided not to refuse their invitation and both joined the meal. They started eating in silence, and the taste of the prepared dish amazed them. For the past few days, they had been eating only smoked meat and dishes that Arabel was trying to cook. But it was completely different, so delicious that they couldn't even hold back their tears while enjoying the meal. Seeing their tears, the group smiled. According to them, they guessed that the couple had been wandering through the forest for several days and had not eaten normal food. "Idan, Arabel, could you tell us in detail about your origins and how you ended up in this forest?" asked Eulalia when they finished eating. Idan and Arabel were already ready for this conversation. During the meal, they exchanged thoughts and decided to hide their true identity, and instead tell the legend they had made up for them in the identity card they had received in the adventurer's kit. "We come from a small village on the continent of Ludelia. Since childhood, we dreamed of becoming adventurers, and finally our dream came true. We came to the continent of labyrinths to try our luck, conquer dungeons, and earn a living," Idan said sheepishly. He was overcome with a sense of unease that he had so blatantly lied to his rescuers. "And how and when did you end up here?" asked Eulalia curiously. The others were also looking at them with interest. "We fell into a spatial crack and ended up in this forest 4 days ago without even realizing what had happened. We don't know where we are. Can you tell us?" Idan asked, asking the question that had been bothering them since they arrived at this place. After hearing their story, the whole group was amazed. Idan and Arabel couldn't understand why they were looking at them so strangely. "How is this possible?" blurted out Ella when she recovered from her surprise. But noticing Eulalia's stern look, she quickly covered her mouth with her hands. Eulalia glanced at Ella and turned to the couple. "I don't understand why you're lying to us after all we've done for you. One of us even saved your life." The abrupt change in Eulalia's behavior startled Idan and Arabel. "This place is called Limbo. It is a vast space, independent of the rest of the world, and all this space is a prison. The only way to end up here is to be engulfed by the dungeon on the labyrinth continent if you don't manage to leave it before the reset moment. Locals claim that there is no way out of here. No one has ever managed to leave Limbo." Silence fell after Eulalia's words. Idan and Arabel finally found out the name of the place they were in. As the system said, it was an independent space, but they could not even imagine that they would end up among the prisoners of the dungeon. Chapter 28. Limbo. It took the couple some time to process what they had heard. They had a lot of questions they wanted to ask Eulalia, but they held back. They understood that if they asked the usual, banal questions that are known to all the inhabitants of this world, it could arouse suspicion. In addition, they began to worry about the silence of the system. Since they had woken up, they had repeatedly addressed her, but she had remained speechless. The couple felt abandoned. It was the system that brought them together, giving them tasks and requirements, and now, when they needed it most, it was gone. The system's silence was a real blow to them. At the same time, they did not believe that she could leave them. They were inclined to believe that something had happened to the system. The couple couldn't say exactly when something happened to the system. The last time they had talked to her, she had pointed out the mistakes in Arabel's cooking. But the system couldn't have been disappointed in them and refused to cooperate further, right? The proof that something really happened to the system and it didn't leave them was access to their status. The information about the system was still present in this status. The system was unpredictable before, giving out strange tasks, and even its initial rewards were strange. I wouldn't be surprised if her current silence turns out to be another test or something like that, Idan and Arabel mentally said after the discussion. Arabel looked at him in disbelief. Except for one award, all the others were just right. Arabel disagreed with his arguments. She still remembered how she didn't get the beauty pill. Idan didn't argue with her. All this time they were communicating using a mental link, and no one could hear them. However, the way they looked at each other, and the way they sometimes couldn't control their emotions, had already aroused Eulalia's suspicions. Eulalia, being more experienced and versed in magic, began to suspect that something was wrong with these two. Although they looked like ordinary adventurers, not very strong, but the fact that they had attracted the attention of a spirit and could possibly communicate with each other through a mental link was suggestive. She decided not to insist and not to ask about it directly. Instead, she decided to gradually and carefully find out everything that interested her. She knew better than to pry into other people's secrets. No one likes it when someone tries to reveal their secrets. Let's say you're telling the truth, that you got into limbo by accident, not like everyone else. What are you going to do and what are your plans? Asked Eulalia. Idan and Arabel were pleasantly surprised by the question. They expected to be thoroughly interrogated, trying to find out the truth. Can you tell us more about Limbo and this forest? We don't know anything about this place at all. For the past few days, we have been wandering aimlessly through the forest, not knowing where to go or what lies ahead, Idan asked, showing that they were completely unaware of the terrain. Eulalia did not object. Before sharing the information, she informed the couple that they would spend the night here and set off in the morning. The couple could have followed them or gone their own way, but Eulalia strongly recommended joining them, citing their ignorance of the area and Limbo. By this point, the couple still wasn't sure if they should go with them, but Eulalia's words, which she uttered later, completely changed their minds. They were determined to follow her. According to Eulalia, the so-called reset of the surrounding world takes place in Limbo every 7 days. With the exception of the 3 existing cities, everything else in this space will be transformed and changed. The forest where the couple spent the last 4 days will be moved to another location, and the very structure of the forest will change. The clearings where they fought and where they appeared on the first day will look different, and their location inside the forest will also change. It is this realignment that makes studying Limbo very challenging. However, over the years of research, several constants have been identified that remain unchanged even after reset. First of all, these are the 3 cities mentioned. The realignment does not affect them, and they remain the only safe places in Limbo during this process. Secondly, these are forbidden areas. There are several dangerous and deadly places in Limbo that are considered off-limits. This forest is one of them and is called the Forest of Doppelgangers. Their camp is currently located in the middle zone of the Forbidden Forest. The route the couple was following led them straight into his heart, the most dangerous place. Few would be able to return after crossing the boundary between the middle and central levels. The couple was surprised. They didn't know if it was their luck or bad luck that the path they chose led them deeper into the forest rather than out of it. But at the same time, if they hadn't chosen this path, they probably wouldn't have met Eulalia and her group. Eulalia and her group were in the forest to gather information about him. After another reset, it was discovered that one of the forbidden zones appeared in the vicinity of their city. Therefore, she took her youngest and hired a couple of adventurers to explore the forest. Their group had enough strength to explore its outer and middle levels comfortably and without risking their lives. Although they had a strong desire to explore the central area, they restrained themselves, unwilling to risk their lives. Therefore, they limited themselves to studying the intermediate level. After each reset of limbo, all the forbidden areas changed their location and internal structure, but their general territory remained unchanged. Limbo can be compared to a huge maze that is rebuilt every 7 days. The forbidden areas are also mini mazes that change along with the general reset. It's like mazes inside a maze. Many of those who find themselves in limbo are sure that the secret to getting out is inside the forbidden areas. However, over the years, no one has been able to find an answer or even a hint of a way out. Many have already given up and decided to settle in limbo, and some have been absorbed into limbo and become a part of it. Eulalia was one of those who had not yet given up hope of leaving limbo. After learning the details about limbo, Idan and Arabel made a firm decision to join Eulalia in her search for a way out. Their goal of leaving limbo was exactly the same as Eulalia's, and they had less than 6 months left to find a solution. Chapter 29. Leaving the forest the next morning, the group, along with Idan and Arabel, left the camp and headed for the exit from the forest. This was the first night for Idan and Arabel when they were able to get a good night's sleep and rest. The most amazing thing happened to their bodies. After awakening, their recovery speed increased significantly. All the cuts and injuries received earlier had almost completely disappeared after a night's rest. This came as a real surprise to Arabel. Not even the scars from the cuts remained on her body. This discovery was of great importance not only for her, but for all women. She was afraid that as she got injured, her body would be covered with scars. After a rest, a good night's sleep, and a hearty breakfast, the couple's mood finally improved. They followed Eulalia's group with great enthusiasm. The only thing that marred their joy was the silence of the system. Even after the night, the system did not make itself felt. The first hours of the journey passed calmly, and the group confidently moved forward. According to Ella, after lunch they were supposed to reach the border of the middle and outer parts of the forest, and by evening they would reach its edge. Nemo was silent all this time, leading the group. Idan and Arabel were curious about their savior, and they asked Ella what he looked like under the mask. However, all they got in response was silence. Ella herself didn't know what Nemo looked like and was intrigued by it. She turned to Eulalia for help, who said that Nemo was her youngest. All Eulalia could answer was that Nemo is not an elf and wears a mask not because of shyness, but because of an injury that disfigured part of his face. Unlike normal wounds, his injury was magical in nature, which prevented his body from fully recovering. Due to the same injury, he was still unable to speak. He was her junior, as they both studied under the same mentor. After a while, the group finally encountered the forest dwellers. Among them were both familiar monsters, such as the mirage rabbit and the spiked wolf, as well as strange creatures that Idan and Arabel could not recognize and relate to animals from their world. As expected, the local monsters enjoyed playing with their prey. This is what the inhabitants of the forest of doppelgangers were famous for. Many of those who ventured to explore the forest fell from their clutches, suffering terrible torments. However, over time, strange things began to happen. As they moved through the forest, they encountered monsters more and more often. Usually, Eulalia and Nemo dealt with them, but sometimes Ella and Radek got involved. Idan and Arabel initially only watched what was happening. But soon, when the number of monsters increased significantly, they decided to join their comrades in order to at least slightly weaken their onslaught. They had already gained some experience in battles, so it wasn't difficult for them to distract the monsters. "Something's wrong," said Eulalia when the last monster fell. Everyone agreed with her. They have been in the forest for several days now and have not encountered such strong resistance until today. It seemed that the monsters were purposefully attacking them, and not just because they encountered them by accident. It wasn't until late afternoon that they were able to reach the border of the middle part of the forest with the outside. And only then did they finally realize the situation they were in. Although all the monsters that periodically attacked them were not strong, the group spent some time destroying them. And if this continues, They won't have time to leave the forest before the limbo reset. Realizing this, the group decided to abandon the rest and continue the journey at night, so as not to miss the opportunity to get to the city. No one objected, and everyone readily embarked on the night journey. Idan and Arabel were in awe of their teamwork and strength. They were especially impressed by the leadership qualities of Eulalia and Nemo, who silently and effectively fought most of the monsters alone. Another feature that caught the couple's attention was that Nemo was proficient with both the sword and magic. From what they had learned about Nemo, it followed that he could not speak, but at the same time skillfully used magic. While Eulalia and the rest of the band members always said the words when they used magic. "He's using silent magic," said Ella in response to Arabel's question about Nemo's magic. According to her, only a few people can use magic without words. Only those with outstanding talent in this field can do this. Even Eulalia is not able to create all her magic without words. Only those spells that she has mastered perfectly are available to her silently. However, the quality of her silent magic is significantly inferior to what she does with words. All night, with small breaks, they moved away from the forest, encountering waves of monsters. The situation was becoming more and more absurd. Idan and Arabel, as strangers in this group, began to pray that this situation was not their fault. The group has never expressed suspicion or guilt about them. They were silent because there was no evidence or background for this. By morning, the number of monsters had decreased slightly, and the group approached the exit from the forest. Everyone was exhausted and soaked in the blood of monsters. By sacrificing their night's rest, they were finally able to make up for lost time. The group was inspired, and after taking a little breath and quenching their thirst, decided to leave the forest. However, the doppelgangers of each of them suddenly appeared on their way. Even Eulalia was shocked by this phenomenon. So far, there have been no recorded cases of doppelgangers appearing in the outer part of the forest. They usually live in its middle and central part. Their appearance on the outer border indicated that something had really changed, and this forced the usual foundations of the forbidden zone to depart from their rules. Eulalia could only explain this by the presence of the couple they had picked up in the forest. She had no other options. Before they appeared, everything went on as usual. It seemed that the forest itself did not want them to leave it. Eulalia wondered what exactly was special about them, that even the forbidden zone itself didn't want to let them go. Of course, no one could answer her question. From the look on the couple's face, Eulalia could tell that the couple themselves did not know the answer to this question. Eulalia gritted her teeth and stepped forward, and the others followed her, ready to face their doppelgangers. They saw no other way but to fight and break through them. Chapter 30:30. Finally leaving the forest, the doppelgangers of the group appeared at the most inopportune moment, as if they were deliberately waiting for the group to get tired of constant battles and travel. Eulalia and the others were already aware of the capabilities of their doppelgangers, as were Idan and Arabel. The doppelgangers copied the originals almost perfectly, including their equipment and skills. However, there were several ways to defeat them. The first of them is to surpass yourself. The doppelganger is only able to copy the original once, and it will not be able to strengthen during combat as the original does. Therefore, if you achieve a breakthrough in strength or something similar, you can surpass the doppelganger by becoming stronger than yourself. The second way is to have a secret weapon or something that the doppelganger can't copy. For example, in the case of Nemo, the doppelganger is unable to copy his spirit, which is associated with him. Because of this, the doppelganger is initially weaker than the original, as it does not receive a boost from the spirit. Idan and Arabel also had an advantage, as their doppelganger couldn't copy their system. However, when the system stopped responding, this advantage became unavailable to them. From the very beginning of the battle, Eulalia's group had placed their hope on Nemo. Unlike them, Nemo had a significant advantage over his doppelganger. He had already fought with his reflections several times before, and each such encounter ended in his victory. During his previous battles, Nemo had developed an effective strategy. While the others were holding back their doppelgangers, he quickly dealt with his own and hurried to help Ella and Radek. Eulalia also tried to hold her doppelganger, not allowing her to attack the others. Her doppelganger was the strongest one present. Nemo dealt with the rest of the doppelgangers with lightning speed, including Idan and Arabel. The couple was amazed by the strength their savior demonstrated. They hadn't seen him fight before because of the fog, but now they witnessed his lightning-fast and precise movements that crushed all the enemies. Compared to Nemo, the other's doppelgangers seemed too weak. His every strike and movement were accompanied by spells, and it was impossible to keep track of exactly when he was applying them to his weapons and body. After finishing with the doppelgangers, Nemo pointed with his sword towards the exit they were heading towards, and then hurried to help Eulalia and her doppelganger. Realizing Nemo's intentions, Ella commanded, "Let's go!" Radek hesitated for a moment, but then followed Ella. Idan and Arabel also, though with some hesitation, decided to follow her. They were too weak in this situation and understood that they would be of no use except to become a burden to others. The group, leaving Eulalia and Nemo behind, was heading swiftly towards the exit of the forest. The sounds of fighting gradually faded and disappeared into the distance. Idan and Arabel couldn't tell exactly how long they had been running after Ella and Radek until they finally left this sinister forest of doppelgangers. It wasn't until they were about 100 meters away from the forest that they collapsed to the ground and began to recover. Ella and Radek wasted no time removing their bags from their backs, taking out flasks of water and greedily drinking. When they had quenched their thirst, they offered the flasks to Idan and Arabel, who did not refuse. Both felt tired and very thirsty. When they woke up in the morning, Idan and Arabel noticed that each of the group members had a small bag in which they carried all their belongings. Although the bag was small, the number of things it contained clearly indicated that it possessed unique properties resembling spatial ones. After quenching their thirst and returning the flasks, the group waited for Eulalia and Nemo to catch up with them. Eulalia and Nemo did not take long to wait and soon caught up with the group. They were both breathing heavily, and from their appearance, one could tell that they were injured and very tired, ready to fall at any moment. When they reached the group, they abruptly turned their heads and looked at the edge of the forest. There, at the edge of the forest, stood Eulalia's doppelganger, covered in blood and watching them with a creepy grin. "Calm down," said Eulalia, seeing the panic in the eyes of her comrades. "It won't leave the forest boundary." Only then did they realize why the doppelganger had stopped and wasn't moving in their direction. After calming down and realizing that they had finally left the forest, Ella took out healing potions and stamina recovery potions and handed them to Eulalia and Nemo. They gratefully accepted them and immediately drank them. The group decided to rest for a while and then head towards the city. There was still plenty of time left before the reset. While they were resting, Eulalia couldn't take her eyes off Idan and Arabel. She had serious suspicions about them. After the monsters started attacking them, she began to think that this couple might be related to the forest. To test her guesses, she decided to see if they could leave the forest. To her surprise, they walked out of the forest without any problems. This dispelled her doubts. The couple was not connected to the Forbidden Zone and was not part of it. But then how did this strange couple end up in one of the Forbidden Zones? Eulalia had a lot of questions, but she decided not to ask them yet, but to take the couple to her mentor. Her mentor was a powerful high elf and knew many of Limbo's secrets. Eulalia hoped that her mentor would help her uncover the origin of this couple. Idan and Arabel felt uncomfortable under Eulalia's gaze. They weren't sure if it was their fault that the monsters started attacking them. They wanted to ask the system, but it was still silent, and there was no way they could find out the truth themselves. After Eulalia regained consciousness, she looked away from the couple, which brought them relief. Finally, they were able to breathe a sigh of relief. "Well, stop resting. It's time to return to Usuria," commanded Eulalia, getting up. Everyone followed her, and the group headed towards one of the 3 cities in Limbo, namely the 3rd city, Usuria. Chapter 31:31. Usuria is the 3rd largest city in Limbo, located between Astakis and Ikis. Astakis is the largest and first city in this region, and Ikis is the 2nd largest. All 3 cities are equidistant from each other, forming a perfect triangle. As explained by Eulalia, the names of cities come from the ancient language and simply indicate an ordinal number, from 1 to 3. After leaving the forest, the group did not encounter any difficulties or obstacles and reached Usuria safely. When Idan and Arabel heard about the existence of cities in Limbo, they immediately imagined cities from their world. However, when they saw Usuria, they were somewhat disappointed. They turned out to be too optimistic. The size of the city did not meet their expectations. Compared to the cities of their world, Usuria was a small town with a population of no more than 50,000 inhabitants. The city was surrounded by high stone walls, and it could be entered through several gates from different directions. The architecture of the houses resembled a couple of places from various fantasy films and short stories. Both stone and wooden buildings could be seen in the city, but there was not a single building taller than 5 floors. Most of the houses were 1-story or 2-story. There was a guard at the gate leading into the city who carefully checked everyone entering to establish their identities. Each city had its own way of verifying people and adventurer IDs. Their group was local, so they easily passed the inspection. When Idan and Arabel showed their IDs, the guards used a small crystal to determine their authenticity. Thanks to their adventurer IDs, they were able to enter the city without undue attention. "We came just in time," Ella said, when their group finally entered the city. Soon after they were inside, the guards began to close the gate. The city was bustling with life. It was the first time Idan and Arabel had been in such a place, and they were so excited that they couldn't hide their feelings from the rest of the band. It was a real tour and a real discovery for them. To see the fantasy world and the city with my own eyes, where not only people live, but also representatives of other races, it was like a dream come true. They looked at everything around them in awe. Eulalia, of course, noticed the couple's excitement, but could not understand its reasons. Usuria was not too different from many cities in the outside world. There have been places more majestic and unique than this one. Compared to them, Usuria seemed like just a small village. With the intention of taking the couple to her mentor, Eulalia came forward and led her group towards the city center. On the way, they said goodbye to Ella and Radek. Both of these companions joined Eulalia and Nemo as part of a quest given by the Adventurers Guild. After returning to the city, their mission was considered accomplished. Eulalia did not detain them. After confirming that they had completed the task, she released them, paying the promised reward, adding to it an additional amount for an unforeseen situation with monsters. After receiving the money, Ella and Radek thanked everyone, said goodbye to the group, and went to the Adventurers Guild to confirm the completion of the task. After seeing them off, the group had walked quite a bit when Eulalia stopped and raised her head. "It's starting," she said, looking up at the sky. Idan and Arabel followed her gaze, but saw nothing but a clear sky without clouds. The sun was at its zenith and shone brightly on Limbo. Only now, looking at the sun in the sky, Idan wondered, "Is this really the sun?" He remembered his native star, which they called the sun, and wondered if there was anything in common between it and this star. Or is it just artificial lighting, and the sky around them is fake? He hadn't asked such questions since they'd arrived in this world. They saw it as their own. But now, as a modern man, Idan began to look for answers from a scientific point of view. As they watched the sky, a translucent dome appeared above the city, completely isolating them from the outside world. After a minute of silence, there was a deafening crash. The world outside the city began to collapse before the group's eyes. There was chaos. Soon, everything was swallowed up by darkness and emptiness. "What the?" exclaimed Idan and Arabel in shock. "It's a reset," Eulalia said softly. "Limbo is being rebuilt. What will happen to those who remain outside the city during rebuilt?" Arabel asked Eulalia. If they hadn't met them, they probably would still be wandering in the forest or would already be dead. And if by some miracle they had managed to survive, they would have faced this restructuring. Eulalia looked at Arabel and just shrugged her shoulders in response. Who knows? No one has returned yet and has not told what happened to them after they were swallowed up by rebuilt. They probably all died or became part of Limbo, just like the locals, she said. The locals? Asked Arabel, puzzled. She had heard Eulalia mention locals before, but she thought they were the same as them, the ones who ended up in Limbo and decided to stay here. However, it seemed that wasn't quite the case. These are residents of Limbo. They were born and live here, considering Limbo their home. Unlike us, who came here from the outside world, Limbo considers them his own, replied Eulalia. There are certain boundaries and rules that define the relationship between locals and outsiders. Locals have no right to harm us, strangers, for no reason, just as we are forbidden to harm locals. Otherwise, Limbo will take action and, as a last resort, absorb any violator. However, this does not apply to battles between outsiders, as well as to battles between locals. Eulalia continued. At this moment, a new environment began to appear outside the barrier. The sight was so mesmerizing that Idan and Arabel couldn't believe their eyes. Out there, a completely different environment has already appeared. But before they could enjoy the view, suddenly, after the barrier began to disappear, they felt a sharp pain in their head. Both clutched their heads and fell to the ground, screaming in unbearable pain. The pain was so intense that they could hardly stand on their feet. Eulalia and Nemo, who were standing next to them at that moment, were frightened by the sudden change in the situation. The couple couldn't figure out what was going on. The pain was so intense that they couldn't bear it. Their minds began to blur, and before they lost consciousness from the pain, they finally heard a voice they hadn't heard in days. Attention. Attention, external interference has been removed, the system is released, a danger has been detected. Danger, the system is overstressed. The force was out of control. In order to protect the hosts, the system initializes an emergency reboot. The hosts will be put into an artificial coma until the system is reinitialized. Chapter 32. Milika and Hector, Eulalia and Nemo were perplexed, unable to comprehend what had happened to the couple Idan and Arabel. Both clutching their heads, screamed in pain, and then fell to the ground, losing consciousness. Eulalia examined them and made sure that they were still alive, although unconscious. With their loud screams, the couple attracted the attention of others. Realizing this, Eulalia was about to lead them away when a figure suddenly appeared next to her. "Mentor," Eulalia exclaimed, instantly recognizing this creature as her mentor, the High Elf. Like Eulalia, she had pointed ears, but longer than Eulalia's, and blonde long hair that almost reached the ground. Her curvaceous figure attracted the gazes of all the men in the area. "Little Eva and little Nemo?" The High Elf addressed her charges. Nemo simply nodded in greeting, while Eulalia, on the contrary, immediately turned into an enthusiastic admirer, her eyes sparkling at the sight of her mentor. After greeting her charges, the elf looked at Idan and Arabel with pleasure. Her eyes shone with joy at the sight of these two. Then her gaze darted to the side, and a short, middle-aged man with a long beard appeared in front of her, a representative of the race of high dwarves. "Hector, by what fates?" the elf asked with surprise and a smile. "Don't pretend, Milika, you know why I'm here," snorted the dwarf whom Milika called Hector. "No, I do not know why you are here. Can you explain?" Milika replied. At that moment, Eulalia and Nemo fell silent, trying not to make any noise, because two of the most powerful people in the city were standing in front of them. One of them was the official ruler of the city and the local population, and the other was the leader of the outsiders. Hector did not answer the elf's question. His gaze landed on Idan and Arabel, and his eyes narrowed. It was unclear what he was thinking as he looked at the couple. Suddenly, Milika appeared in front of Hector, blocking his view, and looked down at him from her height. "What are you up to?" she asked in a different tone. Hector just smiled back and didn't say anything. Milika didn't like that smile. She knew this dwarf too well. After looking into the eyes of the Milika for a while, Hector turned around and left in silence. He had already realized the whole situation, and there was no reason for him to stay and come into conflict with the elf. Milika silently watched him until he disappeared from sight. Then, returning her gaze to the couple, she ordered Eulalia and Nemo to pick them up and take them to her house. This order surprised Eulalia and Nemo very much, because they knew perfectly well that their mentor hardly lets anyone into her house. Only they, who were recognized as her disciples, could freely enter there in search of guidance. Nemo and Eulalia, accompanied by their mentor Milika, brought the unconscious Idan and Arabel to the latter's house. It was a spacious two-story building surrounded by a picturesque garden. Being an elf, Milika appreciated the beauty of nature and grew her own garden. After putting the couple in the spare rooms on the second floor, Nemo and Eulalia followed their mentor to her office located on the first floor. The room was filled with many books, parchments, and various potion-making equipment. Milika, sitting comfortably at the table, looked at her students. "So, tell me what happened and how did you meet this couple?" she asked, waiting for an explanation. Eulalia came forward and told in detail about her attempt to explore the forbidden forest after another reset. She took Nemo and 2 adventurers from the guild with her to set off together. Milika was not surprised to hear Eulalia's story. This was not her student's first outing in search of information. However, her interest increased when Eulalia got to the moment when Nemo met that very couple. Eulalia described all the details in detail and concluded her story with how suddenly the couple clutched their heads and screamed in pain, fell, and lost consciousness. "Interesting. It's very interesting," said Milika enthusiastically, a smile playing on her face. Eulalia, who was under the tutelage of her mentor, was surprised and hypnotized by this smile. In all the time she had spent under Milika's guidance, she had almost never seen her so joyful. Nemo just looked at her with admiration. For him, Milika was the most beautiful woman in the city, but something inside him told him that she was not the most beautiful in the world and that there was a woman who was more beautiful than her. He didn't know who it was, but he was convinced it was. "Mentor, do you know who they are?" asked Eulalia. "Of course not," replied Milika with a smile, "but I have a rough idea of where they came from." "What? Do you know where they come from?" asked Eulalia, surprised. "Well, only approximately," said the militia. Looking at her students, Milika continued with a smile. "From now on, everything you hear must not leave this room. Am I making myself clear?" "Yes, mentor," confirmed Eulalia, and Nemo just nodded. "Good. Let's start with what you said, Eulalia. The couple wasn't lying to you when they said they got into limbo through a rift." These words of the mentor surprised Eulalia. She thought the couple had lied the whole time, but Milika claims that they are telling the truth. They are not from the outside world and could not enter the dungeon to be swallowed by it. So, there's only one thing left: they're from another world. And you can only get from another world to limbo through a spatial rift. Seeing her students' distrust, Milika continued her explanation. From another world? Eulalia couldn't believe her mentor's words. Even Nemo was intrigued when Milika mentioned another world. "Yes, and that's not the only thing related to them. The monsters that attacked you when you decided to leave the forest are also related to them. I do not know how exactly, but they attracted the attention of the Forbidden Zone, and it tried to absorb them. Normally, Forbidden Zones don't show such aggression against ordinary outsiders. But if the zone finds out that the outsiders are not from the outside world, but from another, it will make every effort to take them over," suggested Milika. After a short pause to reflect on her words, she continued. "However, I'm a little confused by the fact that the zone didn't unleash the full power of the forest on you. As if she underestimated you or something was holding her back. Otherwise, I don't think you would have been able to leave the forest." After hearing about their mentor's suspicions, Eulalia and Nemo felt uneasy. They barely made it out of the woods, and if they had stayed any longer, they wouldn't have made it back to the city before the reset. Not only is the Forbidden Zone, but Limbo has noticed their presence. However, unlike the Forbidden Zone, Limbo won't act until the couple breaks his rules. I'm more worried about Hector. He also found out about their essence after seeing them, especially considering his connections with Limbo. With these words, a smile appeared on Milika's face, which grew wider. After so many years of waiting and monotony, everything is finally getting more interesting, she thought. Chapter 33:33. Milis. A could no longer say for sure how much time she had spent in Limbo. In her attempts to uncover the secrets of the Forbidden Zones and Limbo herself, she experienced many dangerous situations that almost cost her life. Due to her injuries, she repeatedly found herself on the verge of death, and numerous losses of consciousness confused her, making it difficult to understand the passage of time. As a high elf, she was long-lived, and by the standards of her kind, she was still young and full of life. However, she was marred by only one thing: the inability to leave Limbo. Over the years, her existence has half-merged with Limbo. Then she discovered that Limbo has his own primitive consciousness, which follows special rules. It was only because of her strength that she hadn't completely assimilated into Limbo yet, and that angered him. Some of Limbo's secrets leaked out, and the elf took possession of them. Limbo's mind wanted to consume her, but it couldn't do it for no reason. As long as Milika didn't violate Limbo's rules, or as long as she was in a safe city, Limbo couldn't do anything against her. This restriction deprived the Milika of the opportunity to independently seek a way out of Limbo. She could only hope and pin all her hopes on her students and subordinates. Knowing that he couldn't absorb her, Limbo turned his attention to Milika's students and subordinates. Through its associated local resident and city leader Hector, it manipulated other outsiders from other cities to attack and eliminate them. All these attempts were aimed at forcing the Milika to break the rules of Limbo or leave the city. Over the years, Milika has lost many of her loyal followers and students in this city. She even thought about giving up and stopping looking for a way out. For many years, she refused to take students until she met a young elf who was in Limbo. Because of her proximity to her race, she took her under her protection. Milika did not succumb to Limbo's provocations. As a result, they came to a truce. Limbo stopped attacking her students and subordinates, and Milika pledged not to leave the city and not share Limbo's secrets with outsiders, including her students and subordinates. If she breaks these rules, Limbo will have every right to devour her. Now Milika has only 2 students and a few loyal subordinates. She had recently taken Nemo, her last student, less than a month ago, so their relationship was shallow and not as strong as between her and Eulalia. Nemo was full of mysteries. She had high hopes for him, believing that he would be able to find a way out of Limbo, as she had failed. However, the appearance of the couple Idan and Arabel changed all her plans. Due to her connection with Limbo, she knew for sure that these 2 came from another world and not from the outside, like other outsiders like her. Realizing this, she immediately made the decision to take them under her protection from Limbo. Now that they were her charges, Limbo's hands were tied because of the agreement between them, and he couldn't directly try to get to them. Limbo could use locals like Hector to manipulate other outsiders to get to them, but they could handle it. The most important thing was that now the forbidden zones wouldn't fiercely hunt the couple if they went to those zones in search of information. "Mentor, why are you so sure that they came from another world?" Eulalia asked curiously, wanting to understand where her mentor got such confidence in this. "It's a secret," Milika replied with a slight smile. "Don't doubt me, little Eva, I'm absolutely sure that they really came from another world." Although Eulalia was not completely satisfied with the answer, she did not insist. "I understand that you have a lot of questions, but we will discuss everything later. Go and mind your own business now, if you have any." The Milika sent his charges about their business. Nemo, having received permission, immediately left the office. Eulalia, after lingering a bit, also decided to follow his example. However, before she could reach the door, she heard her mentor's voice. "Take care of them, little Eva. And as soon as they wake up, let me know. I want to talk to them personally." "Okay, mentor," Eulalia replied before leaving. She went to check on Idan and Arabel's condition, as requested by her mentor, and then went about her business. Milika, left alone in her office, took out her personal diary and immersed herself in thoughts about the upcoming events that would inevitably come with the appearance of this couple in Limbo. Meanwhile, Nemo had already left his mentor's house and was heading to the neighboring house, where he was allocated a small room. In addition to him, several other outsiders who were subordinates of the Milika lived in this house. Upon reaching his room, Nemo dropped his bag next to the table, took off his sword and shield, and then got rid of the cloak that hid his body. Then he fastened the straps attached to his right arm, and with a thud, the metal prosthesis fell to the floor, leaving only his shoulder and elbow. After that, he took off his mask and looked at himself in the mirror. The right side of his face was disfigured. His right ear and hair were missing, his right eye was completely white, and part of his cheek was missing, revealing his teeth. Nemo stared at himself in the mirror for a while longer, until he was distracted by a spirit appearing in the room in the form of a white lump of light. "Don't worry, Nemo. We will definitely find a way to heal your wounds. The most important thing right now is to find a way out of this place and figure out who you really are." A spirit named Izzy tried to comfort Nemo. She was connected to him and understood his feelings, so she was acutely aware of his mood. Sighing, Nemo put the mask back on, unable to look at his ugly reflection anymore. Then he noticed the pendant that hung around his neck. Clutching it tightly, he tried to remember where he got this thing from. Nemo couldn't remember anything about the pendant, but he knew it was very important to him. Milika's words came back to him when she saw the pendant. "Who would have thought that you have such an amazing thing? Do you have any idea what that is?" "Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot for a moment that you don't remember your past. Remember, it's not just a pendant, you better not lose him. Inside this pendant is a piece of the soul of the person who gave it to you." Usually, representatives of the higher race give such things to their partners or husbands so that they can always know their location. If that's the case, then whoever gave you this pendant is either your girlfriend or your wife. These words sank deep into Nemo's soul. He longed to find out who had given him this pendant, and he felt that this person was very dear to him. Even Izzy felt an inexplicable connection with the soul inside the pendant, the same as she felt with Nemo. This indicated that the owner of this soul had a strong bond with both of them. Chapter 34. Wake up. When Idan opened his eyes, he felt confused. His head was buzzing so much that he couldn't think clearly. This condition was so excruciating that compared to it, a hangover seemed like an easy workout. He did not know how long he had been lying in this state. Gradually, the pain began to ease, and he began to come to his senses, remembering who he was. After a while, he finally woke up and looked around. He was in an unfamiliar room, lying on a bed. His body was stiff, and it was difficult for him to move. He was wearing a simple, thin white robe. He breathed a sigh of relief when he realized that he wasn't naked. He noticed his adventurer's clothes neatly folded on the chair next to the bed. With difficulty, he raised his hand and began massaging his temples. While he was doing this, he had a strange feeling that he had forgotten something very important, or rather someone. Then he began to remember who he was. Images of his family surfaced in his memory, his mother, father, and sister. Then he remembered the disaster their world had faced, the awakened, and the heroes of the Federation. And finally, an image of a girl with long red hair and a system appeared in his mind. It was only then that he realized Arabel wasn't with him. This discovery alarmed him. He struggled to his feet and tried to stand up. His legs wouldn't obey him, and his attempts to get up were unsuccessful. After a while, he felt the tingling sensation returning to his legs. After a while, he managed to get to his feet and staggered towards the door. The door was unlocked, and he easily opened it, finding himself in a small hallway. At that moment, he saw the door of the next room open, and a figure came out with a slight limp. After taking a closer look, Idan recognized Arabel in her and breathed a sigh of relief. She was wearing light white clothes that covered her entire body. Arabel, coming out of her room and still adjusting to her body after a long sleep, also saw Idan and breathed a sigh of relief, making sure that he was okay. At that moment, both were thinking about the same thing. After they woke up and remembered everything that had happened to them, and realizing each other's absence, the first thing they decided to do was make sure their partner was safe. Although they were connected thanks to the system, the few days they spent in the forest trying to survive had already strengthened their bond a little. In this unfamiliar world, they were the only people close to each other. "Oh, look, what do we have here? It looks like someone is not fulfilling their duties." A playful female voice rang out from the far end of the corridor. When Idan and Arabel heard the voice, they turned around and saw a smiling elf woman in front of them, who was watching them intently. "Damn it, what's wrong with this elf? Why is she so beautiful, and why does she have such a curvy body?" thought Idan, unable to take his eyes off her. At that moment, he forgot that he was connected to Arabel, and when she heard his thoughts, instead of getting angry, she completely agreed with him. Even she, being a woman, was fascinated by the elf's appearance and felt envious. "Don't drop your jaw, boy," Melissa said to Idan, noticing his astonished look. She was already used to such displays and did not say anything. "Ah, I'm sorry," apologized Idan, looking away in embarrassment. "It's okay, I'm already used to it. I see you've just woken up, so feel free to rest a little more. As soon as you're ready, come downstairs and join me, I'll cook you breakfast." With these words, Milis, without waiting for the couple's answer, went down to the first floor. The couple watched her go in silence. When she disappeared from sight, they both looked at each other and, embarrassed, looked away. Idan felt uneasy about being captivated by the beauty of another woman when Arabel was around. In turn, Arabel felt embarrassed that, being a woman, she was also impressed by the stranger's beauty. Luckily for her, Idan didn't notice her reaction. "Are you all right?" asked Idan, pulling himself together. "My head is still buzzing, and I haven't fully adjusted to my body yet," Arabel replied. Idan felt the same way. "Let's go to my room, we have something to talk about," Idan suggested, inviting Arabel into his room. She followed him without hesitation. When they got inside, Idan invited Arabel to sit on the bed, and he took off his adventurer's clothes from the chair and sat on it. As the two sat down and looked at each other, Arabel realized that she was still wearing the ghost mask. She took it off and put it next to her. At that moment, her black hair changed to scarlet, became longer, and fell onto the bed. Idan had not seen her real appearance for a long time, so he was mesmerized by her beauty and stared at her. Arabel noticed his gaze and was slightly embarrassed, but deep down she was happy to see him like this. However, she did not show him her joy. Realizing that he was distracted by her beauty again, Idan closed his eyes and sighed, and then finally pulled himself together and said, "System?" "Yes, host." The familiar, monotonous voice of the system was heard. Upon hearing it, Idan and Arabel breathed a sigh of relief, making sure that the system had not abandoned them. But then, remembering what had happened, they began to get angry. "System, do you even realize that you almost fried our brains?" Idan asked indignantly. The echoes of that event hadn't passed yet, and there was still a buzz in their heads. "Yes," the system replied succinctly. When Idan heard this answer, he became even more angry. However, instead of yelling at the system, he began to calm down. He understood that it was pointless to argue with the system. "System, can you explain what happened and why you didn't respond to our calls?" asked Arabel. "Yes, host. Answering your question, the system made a mistake that was discovered by the consciousness of this independent world. The consciousness of this world was trying to invade the essence of the system and learn its secrets. With the current strength, the system couldn't withstand the invasion and suffered some damage. In order to protect the system, it was forcibly blocked, and all connections with the owners were lost. Everything happened in a matter of seconds, and the system didn't have time to warn the hosts." After listening to the explanation of the system, the couple fell into silence. They learned several important things from this conversation. First, the world has its own consciousness. Secondly, this consciousness is able to detect the presence of the system and influence it. This was not the most pleasant news. The hosts, "Don't worry so much. As already mentioned, the system made a mistake by revealing its presence and opening access to the consciousness of this world. She didn't realize that this independent world had its own consciousness, and she was careless without taking the necessary precautions. It won't happen again." The system's words seemed to calm the couple down. However, when they heard the next words, their mood soured again. As a result of the mistake made, the interference of the consciousness of this world, and the damage received, the process of assimilation of alien energy with the bodies of the hosts has accelerated significantly. Currently, a little more than 3 months remain before the complete and irreversible integration of energy with bodies. In this regard, the deadline for completing the task will be adjusted. "Damn it," said Idan and Arabel at the same time. Chapter 35:35. At the dining table going down to the first floor, the couple did not feel in a good mood. "Oh, you've already woken up," exclaimed Eulalia, meeting them in surprise. Then she quickly turned around and ran to her mentor's office to inform her of their awakening, unaware that Milika already knew about it. Having failed to find the Milika in the office, Eulalia was puzzled. Her mentor usually spends most of her time in her office. "Well, how did you rest?" came the voice of Milika from the kitchen, from where she appeared. "Yes," Arabel replied, and Idan nodded in agreement. Soon, all 4 of them sat down at the table and quietly began to have lunch, prepared by the Milika themselves. Milika didn't ask any questions, just invited them all to the table. Eulalia enthusiastically devoured the food, literally beaming with happiness. She rarely had the opportunity to join her mentor for lunch and taste the dishes she prepared personally. Idan and Arabel were pleasantly surprised. The dishes they tried seemed simple and not so exquisite, but their taste was so delicious that they could barely tear themselves away from them. "Let's get to know each other better. My name is Milika Celestria, and I am a high elf from Magelia," Milika introduced herself. You are already familiar with Eulalia. She's my student just like little Nemo, she continued. Although a little late, but better late than never. My name is Idan Fane, and this is Arabel Morgan, my fiancé. Idan took the initiative. He was already getting used to being her system fiancé, while Arabel was still embarrassed when he openly declared her his bride. Idan and Arabel, yes. Are these your real names, or is that your name in this world? Asked Milika, making it clear to the couple that she already knows that they came from another world. This question, of course, surprised Idan and Arabel. Don't be surprised, hosts. She is one of the most powerful beings in the city. The same waves emanate from it as from the consciousness of this world. It is highly likely that she has some kind of connection with this consciousness. Therefore, it's no secret to her that you're from another world, the system said, anticipating the couple's question. That's it. Idan exclaimed in his mind, realizing this. The real ones, Arabel replied. In this world, no one knows us, and we don't need to hide. I see, agreed the Milika. Miss Milika, what are your intentions towards us? I don't think you just decided to take care of us and even cook dinner for us personally. Especially since you made it clear right away that you know where we're from, Idan asked bluntly, not trying to hide or evade anything. Straight to the point, yes, I like this attitude, Milika said with a smile. Before we start, can I see what you look like without a mask? Milika asked Arabel. She wasn't surprised. She just turned her head and looked at Idan, who nodded his agreement. How interesting, whispered Milika, watching their interaction. After receiving Idan's approval, Arabel took off her mask, and her true appearance was revealed to everyone. Milika and Eulalia were amazed. Arabel was even more beautiful than they had expected. You look absolutely gorgeous. Why are you hiding such beauty? Milika praised Arabel's beauty. Thank you, but compared to me, you are just a goddess of beauty. Arabel replied, not being modest, and praised the beauty of the high elf. Then she continued. This is just a precautionary measure. Although we come from another world, the history of our world has already taught us that beauty without the ability to protect itself can only attract trouble. You are strong, so you don't have to hide anything and be careful. As you can see, I'm weak. You're very smart. I stopped thinking about such things from your point of view a long time ago. And yes, I agree with you, that's really the way it is in this world. Although Milika said these words, she did not specify that one of the reasons for her confidence was her origin. She was an elf. Elves are naturally beautiful, and they don't need to hide their beauty. If anyone dares to attack or kidnap them, they will instantly become the enemy of the entire elven race. Therefore, in their world, few people would risk raising a hand against elves with bad intentions. Okay, I'm satisfied, said Milika, seeing Arabel's true appearance. I want to make an agreement with you. From Eulalia's stories, you roughly understand where you are, and I'm sure you know there's no way out of here. Knowing that you came from another world, I don't think you will give up trying to find a way out. But did you know that if you don't leave Limbo after a certain time, outsiders will become part of Limbo? Milika said, watching the couple closely to see their reaction. Idan and Arabel already knew, so they weren't too surprised. They were surprised only by Milika's first offer of an agreement. Milika, seeing that the couple didn't show much surprise, was also a little startled. Did you know about this? She couldn't resist asking. Knew about what? That our bodies absorb the energy of this world, and if we don't leave it before we fully assimilate, we will become a part of this world ourselves? Yes, we are aware of this. We immediately felt these changes happening to our bodies the very day we got here, Idan said, mixing truth with lies. In fact, they didn't figure it out, but the system did. That's how it is. That's even better. You can omit a lot, Milika said with a smile, and her smile grew wider and wider. For her, the discovery that the couple immediately recognized this feature of Limbo was significant. Let's get right to the point. I'm offering you my help and protection, and in return, I want you to cooperate with me in finding a way out of Limbo. I admit that over the many years we have spent in this place, we, the locals, have not been able to achieve significant success. However, we still haven't given up hope. Thanks to my power, not all outsiders have been completely assimilated into Limbo, and they have a chance to leave it if we find a way out. All this time, Milika did not take her eyes off the couple. Idan and Arabel were surprised and delighted to hear this suggestion. They supported the idea of cooperation with both hands. They realized that they were too weak, and just the two of them would not be able to find a way out in the allotted time. Moreover, due to the error of the system itself, this period was almost halved. "You're talking as if we can really find a way out. Why are you so sure?" the couple asked, taking their time to agree. They wanted to hear more details before making a decision. "It's pretty simple. I'm willing to take the risk, mainly because you came from another world. There have been no visitors from other worlds to Limbo yet. I think it's fate. If you can't find a way out, then I do not know who can do it." With these words, the Milika stopped abruptly, as if remembering something. "Although before you appeared, I had high hopes for Nemo," she suddenly said, mentioning Nemo. "If you look closely, you look a bit like him. You're almost the same age. I also see that some force has tied your fate together, just like Nemo, who has a connection with 3 representatives of the higher race at once." Milika continued with a playful smile. "I can't say exactly what kind of connection unites you, but I can assume that it makes you partners. That's why Idan claims that you, Arabel, are his fiancé, isn't it?" Milika's question hit the nail on the head, and the couple were embarrassed that someone had guessed it so easily. They began to resent the elf's behavior, not understanding how she managed it. She seemed to learn more about them just by looking at them, as if she were reading a book. They had no idea that they were giving her the answers to her questions by their own actions. Seeing the embarrassment on the couple's faces, Milika laughed, realizing that she had hit the nail on the head. From the author. It would be great if those who have read this chapter could share their opinions about the current story. What do you like and what don't? In addition, I would like to know your opinion about the pace of the narration. Perhaps it's worth omitting some details and paying more attention to the pace, speeding it up. Without feedback, it's difficult for me to understand what exactly readers like and what doesn't. Chapter 36. Information about Nemo. When Milika lived on the continent of Magelia, she had heard legends about how powerful beings from other worlds sometimes invaded their world. Usually, their appearance brought with it destruction and misfortune. However, looking at Idan and Arabel, who were embarrassed and amused her, she could not imagine that they could become the source of such disasters. After all, they were too young and weak. Perhaps in the future, when they grew up, they would cause a lot of problems, but that didn't bother her now. Nemo has a lot of secrets, most of which he doesn't know about himself. Before he got into Limbo, he encountered something that caused him terrible injuries that disfigured his body. Because of these injuries, he lost his right arm, the ability to speak, and almost all of his memories. The Milika felt sorry for Nemo. No matter how much Milika tried to help Nemo with his injuries, her current Limbo limitations kept her down. She wasn't sure if she could help him even if there were no such restrictions. After all, she had a rough idea of the source of Nemo's injury. Idan and Arabel were somewhat puzzled. Why did Milika, who was sure that they would find a way out, suddenly start talking about Nemo? However, they didn't mind learning something new about their savior. If he doesn't remember anything, then how is he? Arabel didn't know how to express her thoughts. Nemo, whom she had seen earlier in the forest, did not give the impression of a man who had lost all his memories. How can he fight and act like this? Milika continued Arabel's question, and Arabel just nodded, agreeing with her. I found him myself and checked his injuries. Memory is a complicated thing. Usually, when a person loses his memory, he does not forget everything completely. Usually, all the memories are deep inside his mind. To get them back, you need to fulfill certain conditions or stimulate the patient to remember. But with Nemo, it's different. His injury is magical in nature, and this magic has completely erased his memories. No matter what we do, we can't bring back something that doesn't exist anymore. Magic erased his memories, but not his inner self and how he perceives the world around him. He did not become a mentally retarded or helpless child who knows nothing. No, he is well aware of reality. All his abilities are just muscle memory and instincts, which he developed very quickly. Because of his inability to speak, I gave him the temporary name Nemo because he couldn't remember his real name. How long ago did he end up in Limbo? Asked Idan. I roughly understand what you want to know. I found him about a month ago, but I don't know the exact time he entered Limbo. He doesn't remember anything himself. And you can be sure, I've personally checked on his condition, and he hasn't assimilated into Limbo yet. Unlike Eulalia, who has been in limbo for a long time, and I had to step in to prevent her from becoming a part of this place," Milika replied. All this time, Eulalia just listened, not interfering in their conversation. Thanks to this, she learned a lot of new things that she hadn't known before. She was very grateful to her mentor. Without her intervention, she would have already become part of limbo and would not have been able to leave it even if they had found a way out. Besides her, the Milika was followed by several other outsiders. And, as in the case of Eulalia, she prevented Limbo's attempt to absorb them and make them his own. In this world, Milika wasn't the only one who could resist Limbo's interference. There were other powerful outsiders willing to stand up for themselves. Nemo intrigued me with his appearance. If it wasn't for you, I would still be hoping that he would find a way. But now that new opportunities have emerged, the chances that a way out will finally be found have increased significantly. I hope that you will be able to cooperate with Nemo and Eulalia in your search. Idan and Arabel, after listening to Milika about Nemo and the reasons for her confidence in them, began to talk mentally. They came up with the same idea at the same time. Even before they went downstairs, after they learned from the system that the deadline for completing their task had been halved, they talked with the system for a while and found out that they had been unconscious for 7 days. During the conversation, the system unexpectedly gave them a very unusual and perhaps the most important task. Unlike the others, this assignment was called a world quest. Ding! Due to the intrusion of the consciousness of the independent world, the system managed to obtain some information. A world quest is given. The first task is to find a descendant of the Rain clan and make him your champion. The second task is to help your champion get the key and the clue leading to one of the 5 thrones of the world kings. The third task is unavailable. It will be available after completing the previous 2 tasks. The couple was quite surprised by this unexpected quest given by the system. After that, the system went silent without providing any more additional information, leaving them to figure out the details themselves. By then, they had no idea how to find this descendant of the so-called Rain clan, and they were even more unaware of the information about the so-called thrones of the world kings. However, after they heard Milika's story and learned some details about Nemo, they had suspicions whether he was a descendant of the Rain clan mentioned by the system. To test his guess, Idan jokingly asked Milika, because she knew more about Nemo than anyone in this room, including Nemo himself. Nemo isn't a descendant of the Rain clan, is he? As soon as Idan asked this question, the atmosphere at the table instantly changed. Idan and Arabel felt the suffocating pressure that Milika brought down on them. Even Eulalia was affected by this change and, surprised by her mentor's sudden reaction, was breathing heavily. "Where did you get this information?" Milika asked in an imperious voice. The previous relaxed atmosphere at the table was replaced by a tense one. Idan regretted asking the question without thinking carefully, but regrets couldn't turn back time, and what had already been done couldn't be changed. Chapter 37. Partnership, damn it! Is he really a descendant of the Rain clan? Idan and Arabel couldn't believe such an amazing coincidence. This discovery amazed them even more than the sudden change in Milisa's attitude towards them. I asked, "How did you know about this?" Milisa repeated her question. "Miss Milis, you, like no one else, should understand that everyone has their own secrets. Your question concerns one of our secrets that we cannot reveal to you. You have to understand us," said Idan, panting under the pressure. They didn't want to reveal the system, but they could only hint that they had their own source of information. No one likes it when others pry into their secrets. They hoped that such an explanation would suit the Milika. If they were going to cooperate, then each of them had to respect each other. After hearing Idan's answer, Milis, although she was not satisfied, relaxed the pressure, and a smile appeared on her face again, as if nothing had happened. "Miss Milis, rest assured, we have nothing against Nemo or the so-called descendant of the Rain clan. To be honest, we don't even know anything about the Rain clan," Arabel said. Inwardly, she chided Idan for asking this question without thinking about the possible consequences. Idan apologized and promised that from now on he would carefully weigh his actions and ask Arabel's opinion before doing anything. "So, he's really a descendant of the Rain clan?" Idan asked curiously, wanting to make sure of this. If Milis reacted so emotionally, then she probably knows something that they don't know about. I can't say that with complete certainty. Even Limbo doesn't know where he's from. However, I have my suspicions based on the nature of his injury. I can roughly imagine what kind of source and type of magic could cause such damage. Believe me, if a similar spell had hit me or anyone else in this room, we would not have survived. I only know of a few races that could survive this without even awakening their bloodline. Milis replied, voicing her doubts. After hearing Milis' answer, Idan and Arabel were puzzled. If she wasn't sure of her words, then why did she react so emotionally to their question? Why not just deny or say outright what she just said? Don't get me wrong. I wasn't reacting to the fact that you suspected Nemo of being from the Rain Clan. I'm worried that you have information about the Rain Clan. Nowadays, this is a taboo topic, and all references to its existence have been erased. The fact that you, guests from another world, know about the Rain Clan has worried me. Milis explained the reason for her reaction. She could tell what they were thinking just by looking at them. So that's the thing. Let me explain, Miss Milis. We have no idea who or what the Rain Clan is. We only know its name, Arabel said. Idan and Arabel really only knew the name and nothing else. Observing the confusion and other signs in the couple's behavior, Milis became convinced that they were not lying and really only knew the name of the Rain Clan. It's fine if that's the case. I advise you not to mention or tell anyone about the Rain Clan, unless, of course, you want to attract attention to yourself and create problems, said Milis. Idan and Arabel remembered her words and decided that the name of the Rain Clan would become a name for them that could not be pronounced. At that moment, they remembered an old movie where the so-called wizards also talked about a villain, whose name cannot be named. Okay, we'll remember that, and thanks for the advice. Idan and Arabel replied at the same time. However, they were curious to know more about this clan. Forget about it for now. Knowing about this will not help you and us find a way out of limbo, said Milis, seeing how the couple restrained the urge to ask a question. She wouldn't be so smart if she didn't understand what they were thinking. Let's make a deal. If you really find a way to leave Limbo, I'll tell you and Nemo about the Rain Clan. Currently, Nemo has no idea about the clan, let alone that he considers himself human. However, no matter what, he is not a human, but a representative of a higher race. It's just that his bloodline has not awakened, and a seal has been placed on him, blocking it. Because of this, he can't activate his abilities. Idan and Arabel immediately agreed to Milis' suggestion. They couldn't miss the chance to get additional information that related to their task. Then they discussed the terms of cooperation. Milis promised to help them and share the information she had learned over the years in her search for a way out of Limbo, as well as her assumptions. Milis also told the couple about her condition and why she couldn't leave the city. The couple was amazed that Milis couldn't leave the city. In truth, this place was a prison for Milis, but at the same time the safest for the couple, because they were under her supervision and protection within the city. Milis did not miss the opportunity to warn the couple about the locals and about Hector. She briefly explained the rules they had to follow in the city. Limbo already knew about their origins, and Milis was sure that it would use the locals to manipulate outsiders and residents from other cities to try to get to them. Milis did her best to convince the couple not to succumb to future provocations, whatever they might be. The couple listened to her attentively, and the more they listened, the more worried they became. They were currently safe under Milis' protection. However, once they leave the city, numerous dangers await them. They were well aware that they would not be able to resist them in their current state. It was necessary to become stronger as soon as possible. The only way to achieve this was through their system. Until now, they didn't fully understand how it functions. The couple made a firm decision to first understand how the system works and figure out how to improve their level. Only then will they start thinking about finding a way out of Limbo. Chapter 38. Affection. After lunch, the couple went up to Idan's room on the second floor to discuss their plans for the near future. They mostly talked about the system and what awaits them in the coming month. Idan started the conversation. Since we came to this world, and after the system rewarded us for the completed tasks, its attitude towards us has changed noticeably. At first, I thought it was due to the fact that we had awakened and become the real hosts of the system. However, now I have a feeling that the system is deliberately ignoring us, as if we have not yet become full-fledged hosts. Arabel listened attentively to his reasoning and agreed with him. They assumed that after arriving in this world, they would become the real hosts of the system, but it seemed that was not the case. It seemed that the system had not yet fully recognized them. I think now I understand the true purpose of our stay in this world. We have accepted the system and awakened, but now we need to prove that we are worthy of being its hosts. That's why systems send their hosts to another world after awakening to test them. Do you remember the moment when you proposed to me? Arabel asked, looking into Idan's eyes. Idan remembered this moment very well and nodded back at her. At that moment, I was so surprised and excited that I didn't really pay attention to the system's words. But now, remembering them, I can say with confidence that we have not yet passed the classification to be considered the true hosts of the system. Because the system directly told me, both hosts will be teleported to the connected world to confirm their classification as awakened and begin the path of finding a way to save this world. That explains a lot. Not only them, but all the so-called heroes of the Federation have been through this. However, unlike the others, due to the interference of the title of Supreme, they were teleported to a completely different place. It turns out that the system has given us a choice, accept it or reject it, and after we chose to accept, she brought us here. Now we have to prove to her that we are worthy, Idan asked, summing up their reasoning. Yes, it looks like it, Arabel agreed, also coming to the same conclusion. They were still testing the system. The only question is what exactly she expects from them. How do they prove their classification? Ha ha ha, Idan laughed, interrupting Arabel's thoughts about the requirements of the system. When he had finished laughing, he looked at her with a slight sadness and said, I think I know what the system wants. All this time it was in front of our eyes, but we didn't notice. Arabel was taken aback by his laughter and words. Look at your status, at your partner's line, Idan said, and Arabel, following his advice, opened her status and found the line she needed. Partner, Idan Fain, affection, 15%, Idan's name was on that line, and the number in parentheses indicated their level of affection for each other. The indicator has increased compared to the previous time. Arabel wasn't surprised. They had been through a lot together these few days, and she would have been surprised if the level of affection hadn't changed. And then it finally dawned on her why Idan had asked her to pay attention to this line. Now she understood what the system expected of them. The system waits for their relationship to reach a certain level. It's not for nothing that the system is called Supreme Husband System and Supreme Wife System. Seeing the surprise on Arabel's face, Idan waited a bit and continued. I think the system expects our relationship to move to a new level without its interference. You understand that we only met each other thanks to the system. We accepted her only out of fear of losing the opportunity to awaken, not because we had a good relationship. And probably, the system is more aware of this than you and me. Instead of trying to manipulate us again and force us to become husband and wife, she waits for our relationship to achieve this on its own. Although Idan expressed this point of view, he wasn't completely sure of his words. The system was too unpredictable, and he didn't dare claim to fully understand its intentions. Perhaps he is mistaken, and in fact the system is aiming for something completely different, but his assumption was still well-founded. Idan realized that if the system offered them tasks aimed at strengthening relationships, they would not be able to refuse and would try to complete them. However, they will understand that their feelings do not develop according to their own will, but according to the will of the system. It was like coercion, and when someone is faced with pressure against their will, they instinctively resist, and as a result, nothing good will come of it. Perhaps that's why the system stopped paying attention to them after they became its hosts. She has taken a neutral position in their relationship and is waiting for them to improve it without her interference. Arabel was convinced that Idan was right. As someone who grew up in high society, she was well aware that forced and demanding marriages rarely end well. Instead of living in harmony and love, such couples, having fulfilled their obligations, often become strangers to each other. Sometimes they even become fierce enemies. If the system continued to insist on their marriage, Arabel wasn't sure if they would be able to maintain a good relationship with Idan. Since childhood, she had been raised to marry under duress, and although she did not like it, she was ready for it. She understood and accepted that she was not destined to find a man and marry him for love. But now that she was in this situation, she didn't know what to do. There was silence in the room. Each of them plunged into their own thoughts and began to reflect on their relationship. I suggest we forget about it for now and move gradually. I think we should split up for a while and complete the tasks that the system has given us. We are more or less safe in the city thanks to the Milika. I want to find someone who will teach me how to carve carcasses, and I advise you to look for a mentor who will help you master the art of cooking. Let's focus on these tasks first and see what happens, Idan and Arabel suggested. All right, Arabel agreed. Besides, it will allow us to check how far our mental link will work when we are in different places. And I want to try something and see if I succeed, he added. After a short conversation, Arabel left Idan's room and went downstairs. At that moment, the couple found themselves confused. Neither of them knew how to treat each other. Both of them had no experience in such situations, so they decided to break up for a while and think about it, while simultaneously completing the tasks of the system that were assigned to them separately. Remembering the food Milika had prepared, Arabel decided to ask Milika to become her mentor and teach her how to cook. Idan, meanwhile, was wondering who to turn to, Nemo or Eulalia, so that they could help him find an experienced carcass shredder. While the couple was trying to figure out what the system was thinking and decided to act separately, many outsiders from other cities had arrived in the city over the past 7 days. Milika had noticed their movement a long time ago, but did not take any action. Milika just waited and wondered what the outsiders would do when the couple woke up and the news spread between them. Chapter 39. Month progress. The month flew by unnoticed. Idan, thanks to Milika, was able to find an experienced monster butcher in the Adventurers Guild. Arabel, in turn, immersed herself in Milika's training. Milika gladly agreed to her request and began to teach Arabel not only the art of cooking, but also many other important things. Every time one of the couples left Milika's estate, they were invariably accompanied by Nemo or Eulalia. This prevented other outsiders from taking any action against them. In this city, Nemo and Eulalia were known as Milika's direct disciples, and no one risked provoking them. Idan and Arabel enthusiastically immersed themselves in learning and training. In addition to the main task of completing the task from the system, they decided to master magic and swordsmanship, evenly dividing their time. In the evenings, they found time to read information about Limbo and the Forbidden Zones. From time to time, they took small walks to relax and unwind while trying to get to know each other better. Thanks to this, their relationship became stronger each time. Of course, not as fast as the couple would have liked, but they understood that there was no need to hurry in this matter. The decision to act separately helped them realize that they had already become attached to each other over the past few days. When they couldn't see each other for a while, they began to experience a strange feeling of discomfort that they couldn't explain. But as soon as they met again, this feeling disappeared. Nemo and Eulalia became ideal teachers and partners for them when it came to learning magic and swordsmanship for battles. Milika assigned the task of training to her disciples. Nemo taught them swordsmanship and acted as a sparring partner, and Eulalia started teaching the couple the basics of magic. Their status had a mana stat, but the couple didn't know how to use it. So, they asked Eulalia to teach them the basics of magic to see if they could benefit from it. Nemo silently showed them the sword stances, and then made them repeat them over and over again until their bodies memorized these movements. At the end of the training, they held a small sparring session, in which the couple most often found themselves in the role of the defeated. Eulalia started learning magic by infusing her mana into their bodies. They had to sense someone else's mana first and how it circulates inside their bodies. Gradually, Eulalia reduced the flow of her magic, and after a few days, the couple was finally able to sense their own mana, which was also circulating in their bodies. The moment they first felt their mana and entered the path of magic, their system underwent significant changes. Previously, they only had the status window available, but with the discovery of a way to use their mana, they opened a separate window called the Path of Magic. And after a while, they opened the Path of Sword section. The system reported that a window called the Path of Magic displayed their progress in learning magic. There will also be a list of spells that they will master. When the couple opened the Path of Magic window, they only saw the lines showing their current mana count and rank. Their rank was called Magic Follower. Similarly, the Path of Sword window reflected their success in the art of swordsmanship. However, unlike the Path of Magic window, the Path of the Sword window only listed their rank, Sword Follower. At first, the couple could not understand what benefits this new feature brings them. As usual, the system did not go into details, simply and clearly informing them that as they learn and master new abilities related to magic and the sword, they will be displayed in these windows, not in the status window. At first, the couple assumed that these two windows reflected what they had learned on their own and showed their progress. At the same time, the status reflected information about the system itself. However, they soon realized their mistake. When the couple mastered their first spell, Fireball, a new name appeared in the Path of Magic window in the list of their abilities, Fireball and its level, which turned out to be equal to 1. Following that, they unexpectedly received a task from the system. Cast the spell Fireball 20 times. Reward: upgrade the spell level to level 2. This discovery stunned them for a moment. The opportunity to level up the spell was a real surprise and a source of joy for them. With their current amount of mana, they could only make a few successful attempts to reproduce the spell. After each such test, they needed some time to rest and restore their mana reserves. The couple began to study magic and swordsmanship with great enthusiasm. They believed that if there was such a function in the study of magic, then there should definitely be one in swordsmanship. They soon mastered their first sword technique, the slash. The system immediately gave them a similar task related to this technique, the reward of which was to raise the level of this technique. As for the system's task regarding butchering monster corpses and cooking, after 4 days of persistent attempts, the couple finally achieved some success. Idan successfully butchered his first monster corpse, and the system rated his work as satisfactory. Arabel also prepared her first dish, which was also evaluated by the system. They were so happy with their achievements that they couldn't stop smiling that day. By the end of the first week, they had finally completed the system's task and received a reward of system points and local currency. The couple sold all the unnecessary resources that were stored in their vault through the trading functions to the Supreme Merchant system, which earned them extra points. The number of accumulated points increased slightly, but they were still not enough to purchase goods from the system. However, the couple was not discouraged and decided to continue saving. Immediately after completing the previous task, the system offered them a new one, which was similar, but a little more difficult. In this task, it was necessary to improve the existing abilities. After completing the task, a second system ability appeared in their status window in the list of abilities. Idan's was called Cutting Level 1, and Arabel's was called Cooking Level 1. Having completed the task of the system and the tasks of teaching magic and the sword, the couple finally achieved what they wanted. They rose from the first level to the second. This discovery gave them confidence that they could achieve even more if they continued to work hard. Chapter 40. Month progress. Having reached the second level in the system, they felt a noticeable improvement in the main stats. On the very first day after leveling up, during the training, they had already felt the changes. Although the increase in strength was not as obvious as they would have liked, Nemo and Eulalia noticed a significant improvement in the couple compared to the previous days. They wanted to ask what had happened, but remembering the instructions of their mentor Melika, they decided to refrain. Melika asked them not to try to pry out the couple's secrets and to respect their privacy. In addition to improving the main stats, the couple did not receive any new features from the system. The system only asked them to work hard and reach level 10 as soon as possible. After Idan and Arabel completed the system's level-up spells and techniques, they upgraded all their abilities to level 2. The couple waited for some time until the system issued new tasks for the transition to the third level, but they did not receive anything. The system remained silent. Upgrading all abilities to the second level allowed them to reach the third level of the system. However, they had to admit that the path to the 10th level at this rate would be long and difficult. However, they were glad that they were able to upgrade all their skills to the second level. The only remaining tasks were cooking and butchering monster carcasses. This time, the system distributed them differently. Idan got the cooking tasks, and Arabel got the butchering tasks. Arabel was very surprised and even a little confused when Idan got the cooking assignments. But then she laughed and realized that the system wasn't trying to make her a housewife. The tasks of butchering monster carcasses didn't cause her much concern. On the contrary, she was glad to have the opportunity to learn this useful skill. At first, Idan was a little unhappy with this assignment, believing that cooking was a woman's responsibility. However, after thinking about it, he realized that, like many people and men, he perceives stereotypes about the role of women in the family too narrowly. Idan understood that the system sees the world in its own way, and its understanding of the duties of a husband and wife does not always coincide with their ideas. Having accepted this, they took up the task, while simultaneously learning new spells and techniques. By the end of the first month, they had managed to reach the 10th level of the system with great difficulty. The couple could have reached this level faster if they hadn't run into the limitations of the system. They realized that they could not raise all the spells and techniques they had learned from the second to the third level yet. The couple did not know what it was related to, as the system did not share this information. Unlike each other, it took the couple longer to master the art of cooking and butchering and raise it to the second level. They were obsessively learning new spells and sword techniques, not paying attention to their effectiveness, all in order to raise the system level to 10. And finally, it happened. By the time they reached level 10 of the system, the number of spells and sword techniques they had learned had already exceeded a dozen. They were all second level. Following this, their ranks in the Path of Magic and Path of the Sword increased and became Magic Disciple and Sword Disciple, respectively. They have come a long way in a month, and their main stats have almost doubled, and some even more. Nemo and Eulalia were even more impressed by such changes in just 1 month. Even Milika was surprised by their learning rate. She sometimes had the idea of catching and finding out their secret from the couple, but she could hardly restrain this desire. After this month, Idan and Arabel had just over 2 months left to find their way out of limbo. Although they had reached level 10 of the system, the couple did not feel strong and confident enough to take the next step. They still couldn't put serious pressure on Nemo, who was easily dealing with both of them, leaving them with no chance of success. Idan and Arabel were unhappy with their progress and wanted to become even stronger. And finally, when they reached level 10, the system revealed to them a secret. All the owners of the system, having reached this level, undergo ascension tests. Only after successfully completing this challenge can they raise their level above 10. The system informed them that all the system owners from their world, including Arabel's younger brother and Idan's older sister, had already passed their first ascension during the first of the 10 disasters. They are now at the second level of ascension. The ascension trials are unique for each system. It can be a simple task or a complex condition that needs to be fulfilled. For the owners of the systems from their world, the test of ascension was the battle with the first disaster out of 10. In order to develop and raise their level, Idan and Arabel needed to go through ascension. They wanted to know what their trial would be about, until the system reminded them of the potions they had received as a reward for awakening, due to the interference of the title of Supreme. The system informed them that after reaching level 10, they could take the potion and simultaneously start the ascension process in order to maximize its effect and pass the test. Because of the potion, their ascension will be different from their originally planned ascension. The potion will trigger their ascension, and they will pass the test related to the bloodline that is hidden in the potion. Arabel will face the Valkyrie test, and Idan will face the Alpha test. Their efforts will determine how significant the benefits they receive as a result. The couple were amazed by this discovery and finally realized why the system had asked them to save the potions and wait until they reached level 10. The system was already planning their ascension back then. Unlike simply consuming a potion, When their original bloodline is replaced with the one hidden in the potion, upon ascension, the system will not only preserve their current bloodline, but also integrate the new one into their bodies, eliminating all flaws. Moreover, these potions were unusual. According to the system, two supreme systems, the Supreme Bloodline System and the Supreme Alchemy System, made efforts to create them. This was the second and third Supreme System they had heard of. The first was the Supreme Merchant System. In addition, their own system was also considered supreme, although this title was not yet available to them. However, despite this, their system somehow found things related to other supreme systems. Do all the supreme systems have some kind of connection with each other? The couple thought. Leaving this matter for later, they learned that the trials related to the integration of the bloodline would take from a few days to a month. The couple decided to find a secluded and safe place to prepare. Apart from Milika's house, they did not know a more secure place. After warning Milika and her disciples Nemo and Eulalia, they decided to retire to their rooms to take a potion and begin the ascension trials at the same time. For the last time, mentally communicating and wishing each other luck, Idan and Arabel simultaneously gulped down the entire contents of their vials. At that moment, the system started their ascension trials. Chapter 41-41. Sudden changes in the past month. Since the couple Idan and Arabel appeared, Milika has finally been able to dispel her boredom a bit. She spent her time teaching them how to cook and sharing her experiences traveling through forbidden zones. She was curious to watch this couple. She didn't know why, but they stood out from her other students. She assumed that this might be due to the fact that they came from another world, and all this novelty and suspense attracted her. Idan and Arabel had a completely different perception of the world around them. They looked at it from different angles. Even their relationship made Milika smile. She noticed how awkward they felt and acted when they tried to find out about each other. Their very presence became a kind of outlet for Milika. The years spent in limbo proved to be a real challenge for her. The impossibility of leaving the borders of a single city was unbearable for her. At first, only her students could lighten her gloom and dispel her boredom. But over time, teaching and mentoring their charges has become a routine. And soon she had no students left at all, which was the result of Limbo's hunt. Losing every student was painful for her. In the end, she refused to accept new ones and withdrew into herself. Due to the instability of the space around Limbo, the time difference with the outside world was in constant chaos. Sometimes new creatures entered Limbo and were swallowed up by the dungeon, and sometimes no one appeared for several years. Everything changed when, after a long seclusion, Milika finally went for a walk around the city. She met a young elf who had recently fallen into Limbo and was caught by other outsiders who decided to enslave her. Due to her long absence, some outsiders forgot about her existence and decided to enslave the elf. On that day, not only in this city, but also in two others, they remembered Milika. With her own hands, she dealt with all the outsiders who were associated with the enslavement of the elf. Blood flowed through the streets of Usuria, and everyone finally found out who the true ruler of the outsiders of the city was. On this day, Milika took the elf who had been enslaved as her new student in recent years. That elf was Eulalia. Eulalia was only able to dispel her boredom for a short time, and soon she was back to her old self. She was brought out of this state by the news that a new gang of outsiders had reappeared in the city, trading for the slavery of captured outsiders. Without hesitation, she got rid of them too. Among the captive slaves, she noticed a young man who was injured. She would have passed by if she hadn't noticed that the wound on his body wasn't inflicted physically, but with the help of magic. Later, she gave the name Nemo to this young man, as he could not speak due to his injury. In her eyes, Nemo held too many secrets for an ordinary person. First of all, he miraculously survived being affected by the spell. Secondly, Nemo had a symbiotic relationship with the spirit, which greatly shocked Milika. Being an elf, she knew about spirits and revered them as children of nature itself. The spirits were pure and innocent creatures. According to her ideas, the spirits never chose representatives of intelligent races as parents, but always chose innocent animals. And the fact that such a being accepted this young man as his parent seemed unthinkable. Thirdly, this young man had three unusual connections with the higher races at once. The first of these was the pendant he was wearing. Inside, it was a piece of the soul of the one who gave this pendant. Milika knew that such pendants were usually given by superior races, such as the Valkyries, to their chosen partners. Unlike the first bond, the second and third, which Nemo possessed, were marriage marks, symbolizing the union of two beings. These marks meant eternal connection and devotion. The first mark belonged to the dragon race, and the second to the cursed bloodsuckers. Thinking about it, Milika remembered that the Valkyries live in a detached and secretive manner on their celestial continent, not showing themselves to the inhabitants of this world. Ordinary people don't even know about the existence of the celestial continent. But Milika knew that the Valkyries were one of the races claiming to be the ruler of this world. Dragons, in turn, are widespread on the Labyrinth continent and in Magelia. Milika suspected that Nemo might have met one of them on the Labyrinth continent. Bloodsuckers, popularly known as vampires, were originally the indigenous inhabitants of the continent of labyrinths and dungeons. However, due to the ancient war that partially destroyed this continent and led to the invasion of dungeons all over the world, vampires migrated to the continent of Ludelia. Currently, they, along with other races associated with the labyrinth, have occupied a significant part of this continent. Milika wondered how this young man, who was barely 20 years old, managed to attract the attention of three representatives of the higher race. Each of these races is not known for its restraint, and as far as Milika knew, they all have a very possessive nature. Milika suspected that none of the women who had been involved with Nemo in the past knew about the existence of the other two. This realization lifted Milika's spirits, and she was looking forward to the moment when these women would meet and have a real catfight. They were all from a superior race and possessed powerful strength. Milika wondered what kind of destruction their meeting could cause, and how the current Nemo, who did not even know about their existence, would be able to cope with these three. And so, when Milika was sitting in her office, preparing potions and necessary things for Idan and Arabel, who were soon to go to the Forbidden Zones, she felt strange vibrations coming from the second floor. She immediately recognized who their source was and hurried to the second floor. Recently, Idan and Arabel visited her and made it clear that they needed privacy for a while. Milika didn't think much of it at the time, but now she finally realized that this couple was probably up to something. She went to the nearest room, which belonged to Idan, but did not immediately enter, fearing that she might interfere with him. However, she couldn't wait or guess, so she knocked first and waited for someone to answer. She didn't dare to use her soul force to scan the room for fear of provoking a backlash. After no one answered, but the strange waves only intensified, Milika opened the door a crack and looked inside. Instead of Idan, there was a pulsating blood-red cocoon in the middle of the room. Numerous bloody threads stretched from the cocoon, which clung to the walls, floor, and ceiling of the room, holding it in the air. Strange fluctuations of energy emanated every time the cocoon pulsed. Milika was surprised by what she saw. She had never seen anything like it before. Milika was mesmerized by the sight in front of her and forgot for a moment. It wasn't until some time later, when the waves emanating from the cocoon became more intense, that she came to her senses. After leaving Idan's room and looking into Arabel's room, Milika found a similar picture there. Inside Arabel's room, there was also a pulsating blood-red cocoon. Having understood the essence of what was happening, Milika immediately created a restraining and masking spell around her house, designed to hide the waves emitted by the cocoons. She could only sense them because she was close enough. From what she experienced next to them, Milika realized that the waves would get stronger over time, and sooner or later, if their spread was not limited, all residents of the city would feel them. Milika did not want others to find out about this, and therefore decided to hide what was happening. Nemo and Eulalia were soon summoned to their mentor's house. When they saw what the couple had become, they were shocked. Milika quickly explained the situation to them and ordered them to be carefully guarded and monitored, not allowing anyone near the house, not even her subordinates. She only entrusted it to the two of them, as she trusted them completely. Nemo and Eulalia took up their mentor's assignment with seriousness. However, the spirit residing inside Nemo was disturbed and agitated by the waves of energy emitted by the cocoons. "Nemo, Nemo, I want this." Izzy started screaming into Nemo's ears, pointing at the cocoon. Nemo was speechless. "What do you mean, I want this? Do you want to eat it?" asked the stunned Nemo. "No, you fool. The energy it emits is bloodline energy, and it's so pure. If I can absorb it a bit, my cultivation will accelerate exponentially," the spirit said enthusiastically. If she had matched her voice and looked like a little girl, Nemo would have imagined her eyes burning with excitement and desire. "And what needs to be done for this?" he asked, calming down and realizing that she only needed the energy coming from the cocoon. "Just sit under the cocoon and I'll do it myself," Izzy said, starting to rush Nemo. Forgetting about his duty to protect and not let anyone near the cocoon, Nemo himself came and crouched under it. He reasoned that by doing so, he was not violating his mentor's protection order. The spirit named Izzy began to absorb the energy emitted by the cocoon with great joy and enthusiasm, rapidly increasing her strength and growth. Chapter 42. Bloodline change. After taking the potion, Arabel fell into a deep sleep. Her mind was in a fog, and she couldn't tell reality from fantasy. Her thoughts got mixed up, and for a while she was transported back to when she was a child and studied at home under the guidance of a private tutor hired by her family. She remembered those days perfectly. It was then that she began to realize the politics of her family, and her innocent, childish heart began to collapse under the weight of this understanding and parental indifference. Parents have completely distanced themselves from their children, putting them under the full guidance of the family. To them, they were just a means to achieve certain goals, not those they truly loved. Although Arabel's mother and father were considered husband and wife, they lived separately and already had connections on the side. They only occasionally appeared in front of their children, posing as a loving couple in order to create an appearance of well-being in the family. All the little girl's dreams of family love were shattered when she found out that her parents treated them kindly and showed their love only in order not to hurt them too early. When their studies and family care began, they stopped seeing their parents. As they grew up, both twins learned about their parents and that in the future they, like their parents, would have to contribute to the family. Suitable couples have already been selected for them, and a prenuptial agreement has been concluded. As the eldest of the twins, Arabel took full responsibility and took care of her younger brother Arslan. Arslan was a cheerful and playful child who constantly demanded attention and games with her. Arabel never refused her younger brother. Even when her family insisted on discipline and scolded her for spoiling her brother too much and distracting him, she did not obey and always kept him company. Since she found out the truth about her parents, there was only one person in the family who was dear to her, her younger brother. No one else bothered her. As she grew up, her heart gradually became colder, and she began to treat others indifferently, not paying attention to anyone except her brother and the family members responsible for their lives. From an early age, she was taught that she should be loyal and grateful to her family for her upbringing and resources. She did not dare to disobey what was demanded of her. And her younger brother, who also became a tool in the hands of the family, played an important role in this. Despite all the difficulties, the bond between the brother and sister remained strong, and they were always ready to stand up for each other. For Arabel, all these memories were both very familiar and at the same time alien. She couldn't figure out which ones were true and which ones were figments of her imagination. Looking at all this, her heart was filled with coldness, and her emotions gradually faded away. And then the day came when the world plunged into chaos. There were global disasters all over the world. Arabel and her younger brother Arslan were at school that day. However, unlike what Arabel remembered, her younger brother couldn't survive it and died in an accident, leaving her alone. Arabel couldn't believe what had happened. She couldn't tell for sure if this was reality or if everything she had known before was just a dream she had seen. It seemed to her that her brother could not have died, but the fact remained that he did not survive that day. She had lost her closest and dearest person. Her mind denied it, unwilling to accept reality, but something inside her broke. Her mind was in chaos. At that moment, her cocooned body began to change. Her heart, which was beating slowly, accelerated at first from shock and fear, but then slowed down. and soon the beats began to occur at long intervals, necessary only to maintain the life of its owner. Everything Arabel saw during this period was part of her memories mixed with the ascension trial initiated by the integration of the Valkyrie bloodline. After analyzing Arabel's memories, emotions, and lifestyle, the system selected the most suitable Valkyrie bloodline for her based on her initial reaction. The integration of the bloodline began with Arabel's heart, which began to transform. Ice crystals appeared on its surface, slowly covering the entire heart. Eventually, her whole heart turned to ice, and its beats became almost regular, almost once a minute. From the point of view of science, in the world of Arabel, a person is not able to survive in such conditions. However, when her heart was completely covered with ice, she stopped being human. Her skin became snow-white and smooth, and her red long hair and eyebrows acquired a crystal white hue. 2 pairs of ice wings began to grow on her back, which hid her body, enveloping it. A week had passed since the beginning of the couple's ascension trial, and the red cocoon Arabel was in began to change. Eulalia, who was watching what was happening, was shocked. Previously, the cocoon was blood red in color, but now it has begun to change. Before her eyes, he began to freeze and soon turned into an icy cocoon, which once a minute emitted waves of cold and crackling sounds. Eulalia immediately called her mentor, and when Milika came and saw what Arabel's cocoon had turned into, she was even more shocked than her disciple. Unlike Eulalia, she could clearly feel the bloodline waves coming from the cocoon. Milika had only met these creatures once in her entire life, but she hadn't forgotten that moment. Their unique presence and the pressure emanating from them were unmistakable. It was then that she witnessed how they used a unique spell that destroyed another member of the higher race in the blink of an eye. It was under the influence of such a spell that Nemo managed to survive, and that was why her interest in him was so high. And now she could feel the same presence from the cocoon Arabel was inside. Without a doubt, it was the bloodline of the Valkyries. And most importantly, from the state of the cocoon, Milika could tell that this bloodline belonged to the Ice Valkyrie, one of the most ruthless and deadly among all the other Valkyries. While they were both staring at Arabel's cocoon in amazement, Nemo ran into the room. His behavior and intrusion made it clear that something unusual was also happening to Idan's cocoon. Leaving Arabel, they hurried to Idan's room, where they saw a completely different picture. Unlike Arabel's calm and peaceful cocoon, Idan's cocoon seemed to be burning and pulsating with such speed and fury that it seemed as if something was about to burst out. Unlike the waves coming from Arabel's cocoon, Milika was unable to recognize the waves emitted by Idan's cocoon. However, she could say with certainty that the quality of Idan's bloodline was not inferior to that of the Ice Valkyrie. Milika and her disciples were completely perplexed, unable to understand what was going on, while the trials on the path to ascension for this couple were just beginning. Chapter 43:43. The trial of ascension after losing her younger brother, Arabel, who had been able to resist and realized that none of this was true, gradually began to lose touch with reality. She could no longer distinguish fiction from reality and began to perceive the events she saw during the ordeal as real. Her family seemed to have forgotten about her brother's existence after the disaster. They were completely absorbed in creating the United Federation and trying to increase their influence in this new federation. Arabel's parents didn't even come to her brother's funeral or visit her. Everything was organized by the ordinary servants of the family. None of the high-ranking family members came to his brother's funeral. Only she and a few servants saw her brother off on his last journey. And even these servants only acted on the orders of the family, not because they were close to them. Arabel's heart began to hate her family. Since childhood, she had been aware of which family she belonged to, and although she did not like it, she tried to come to terms with it. However, when she lost her only loved one, and her family showed indifference to this event, her patience ran out. Arabel was not stupid and understood how strong her family was. She realized that she would not be able to stand up to her alone, let alone leave her. For the family, she was an ideal tool for political games. Soon after, the world learned about the revelations, and the Federation leadership decided to find the so-called awakened ones. The massive process of serum administration has begun. As a descendant of an influential family, Arabel was among the first to have the awakening serum tested on her. And, unlike reality, Arabel was one of the first to awaken from this ordeal. What she had awakened was the Ice Valkyrie system. Arabel was one of the hundreds of awakened ones who found herself in another world, but soon returned to her own, proving to the system that she was the perfect candidate. Her memories of what had happened in the other world were hazy, and Arabel herself couldn't figure out exactly what had happened there. Her mind seemed to block out everything connected to the other world. With the system's awakening, her appearance changed dramatically. Her skin became snow white, and her long red hair acquired a pure white hue. With each passing day, Arabel became more distant, her emotions dulled, making her cold and calculating. Her eyes reflected only indifference to everything around her. Even the system she had awakened warned her that the more often she used her power, the more she would lose some of her emotions and eventually become an emotionless being. When she became an awakened one, her value in the eyes of the family increased significantly. Even her parents, who had previously ignored her, were now trying to get closer to her and take advantage of it. However, all their attempts to enter her world were met with an icy wall that Arabel had built around herself. She ignored everyone, only occasionally showing her subordination and belonging to the family, so as not to cause their displeasure ahead of time. Many descendants of influential families tried to court her, attracted by her indifference and mystery. She charmed everyone who paid attention to her, but no one could overcome her icy barrier. The family was unhappy with her indifference and demanded that she seduce other awakened young men and attract them to the family. But all their attempts came across a simple word, no, which she uttered in response. Among those who tried to court her was Christopher Hugh, a descendant of one of the most influential Hugh families. Arabel had heard of Christopher Hugh before, but had never met him. However, when she saw him for the first time, something stirred inside her. The emotions she thought she had given up made it clear to her that she hadn't completely become an emotionless being yet. Hatred for this man was slowly building up inside her. Arabel was puzzled as to why she hated him so much. It seemed to her that her soul was trying to break out to strangle him, but she pulled herself together and showed no change in her face or demeanor. She just ignored him. Christopher, like her, was an awakened one. Using his family's influence, he tried to court all possible awakened women in order to attract their attention. Having failed to achieve anything with Arabel, Christopher did not immediately give up his attempts. He left her for last, switching to other women. Arabel didn't seem to notice anything around her. She was completely focused on training and leveling up the system. In the course of her studies, she mastered many systemic abilities. She even managed to master the ability to grow 2 pairs of ice wings, which opened up the ability to fly. If Arabel hadn't given up on her emotions, then perhaps she would have been delighted with her ability to fly. But in her current state, this opportunity was just one of many convenient and useful skills, nothing more. Her strength grew every day, and soon she became one of the 3 most powerful awakened heroes of the Federation. Among them was Christopher, who never gave up trying to get her attention. He tried to get close to her at every opportunity, but every time he ran into an icy wall that could not be overcome. A year after the disaster, the world faced its first serious challenge, an invasion of beasts. Then Arabel finally showed her strength, easily defending several cities alone. Her power was so great that even her own family began to feel fear of her. After the end of the first disaster, the Federation held a lavish event in honor of the victory. All heroes, their family, and influential people of the Federation were invited to it. However, Arabel, at that time, as if encased in ice, was indifferent to this event. Nothing could distract her from thinking about how to become strong and destroy her family. Chapter 44:44. The Trial of Ascension. Over time, her hatred of her own family became a driving force for her. Nothing else could attract her attention. She didn't take any action against her family just because her family had significant influence in the United Federation. If it wasn't for the system's restrictions that were imposed on her every time she harmed or had an impact on mere mortals, she would have destroyed her family long ago. Her current strength was not enough to quickly and decisively exterminate the family. Apart from her, the family was able to attract several powerful, awakened ones to their side, who, although not as strong as her, could buy enough time for the other Federation heroes to arrive and overwhelm her with their numbers. While she would be limited by the system in her actions against mortals, they could take advantage of this opportunity and defeat her. Arabel did not participate in the lavish event in honor of the victory organized by the Federation. She was the only awakened one who disobeyed the order. The Federation couldn't do anything about Arabel. She was too strong, not to mention that she belonged to the powerful Morgan family. After the event, Arabel heard rumors about some kind of high-profile event, which the Federation and Hughes family quickly hushed up. She did not find out exactly what happened, and Arabel herself did not go into details, focusing on becoming stronger. Soon after, the second wave of the serum injection procedure took place, and a new generation of awakened ones was born. After that, Arabel and the rest of the awakened, along with the newly awakened, went to another world. For the first time that day, Arabel felt a little uneasy. She couldn't find a girl she knew among the awakened ones in the first wave. Arabel didn't understand why she remembered her, but she knew for sure that this girl had returned from another world and had survived the first disaster. In addition, she was ranked in the top 10 in terms of strength. Unable to find her, Arabel soon forgot about her and moved into a new world with everyone else. After a few months, those who survived and achieved success returned. They became stronger and gained new information, moving closer to solving the issue of saving their world. However, the main key to salvation has still not been found. Just like last time, her consciousness ignored her being in another world. After returning and becoming stronger, she plunged into training with renewed vigor, striving to increase her level. Their world has changed a lot. After the first calamity, most of the beasts mutated, becoming stronger and more dangerous, making them ideal prey for the awakened ones who used them to develop their skills and levels. Time flew by unnoticed. On the eve of the second disaster out of 10, Arabel enjoyed the peace and quiet that had become familiar to her. But her privacy was disrupted by a sudden call from the Federation. As one of the most powerful awakened ones, she was urgently called in to suppress the out-of-control illegal awakened ones that have been appearing more frequently lately. However, what surprised and caught her attention was especially disturbing. This awakened one had single-handedly taken over the Hugh family's main residence and, without the help of others, defeated and killed Christopher Hugh. For the first time, Arabel, attracted by this news, decided to take a look at the audacious awakened who dared to go against an influential family and, moreover, defeat Christopher, who was on her elimination list. Besides, she was intrigued that some unknown awakened had dared to touch her prey. With the help of her wings, she quickly reached the place, and a terrible picture appeared before her eyes. Everything around the Hugh family residence was engulfed in flames. Many awakened ones arrived and watched in fear. A young man stood in the midst of this chaos and fire. He had short red hair, from which sparks of flame appeared from time to time. In his right hand, he held a flaming blade, and in his left, Christopher's severed head, gripped by fear. Many people looked at this guy in fear. No one knew who he was. They had never heard of such a powerful awakened one. Even among the illegal awakened ones, there was no one who could match his strength. It was obvious that all the flames were created by this young man. This showed his incredible strength, especially considering that he was holding the head of one of the most powerful awakened ones in his hand. The first time Arabel saw him, she felt something stir inside her. Strange visions appeared in her mind. It seemed to her that she knew this young man. At the same time, his red hair reminded her of the younger brother she had lost. For the first time in years, her heart began to beat faster. She couldn't explain how she felt looking at this young man. While Arabel was in turmoil, the young man glared at Christopher's head. He was laughing loudly and muttering something. At the same time, he was crying, and tears were rolling out of his eyes, but before they reached the ground, they evaporated from the heat. He didn't notice the awakened ones around him until Arabel appeared. When he felt her gaze on him, he raised his head and finally paid attention to her. A spark of recognition flashed in the young man's eyes, overcome with rage. It only happened for a moment, but it soon turned violent. A flame burst out in his hands, which in the blink of an eye incinerated Christopher's head, leaving no trace of it. Huge fiery wings appeared behind the young man, and he rushed towards Arabel with incredible speed. At that moment, in the sky above the estate of the former influential Hugh family, two awakened ones collided with the elements of ice and fire. Of course, these two awakened ones were the hosts of a unique pair system, the Supreme Husband system and the Supreme Wife system. And with their meeting came the culmination of the Ascension trial. Chapter 45:45. Final of the Ascension trial. Arabel, lost in thought, was so stunned by the sudden change in her condition that it was only at the last moment that she was able to react and block the blow inflicted by the awakened one with the element of fire. She was at a loss. Of all the awakened gathered here, why was he the one who attacked her? And what was happening to her? Arabel knew for sure that she had never met this man before. But the sudden snatches of memories that came up when she first looked at him made her think that she somehow knew him. But how is this possible? The blow delivered by the guy was powerful, but Arabel was able to stop and block it using her ability to manipulate ice and create a sword out of it. The sword of ice collided with the sword of fire, and the two opposing elements began to overwhelm each other. Finally, gathering her thoughts and suppressing the excitement in her heart, Arabel pushed the guy away. She wanted to talk to the guy to find out who he was and how he was related to her. She also wondered why he had destroyed Hugh's family and killed Christopher. However, the awakened guy did not give her a chance to speak. Immediately after she pushed him away, he launched another attack. There was fury in his eyes, and his gaze was determined to kill her. He looked at her as his sworn enemy, ready to fight to the end. After giving up trying to speak, Arabel finally became more serious and responded to his attacks without hesitation. The battle between them was intense and intense. The shockwaves from their collisions could be felt even from a distance. All the awakened ones watching the battle looked at Arabel with admiration. For many, she was an example of what an awakened person should be like. Her power was undeniable. Most of those present here were from the first wave and knew her well. Among them were those who tried to court her, but received only a cold refusal. When they were awakened, they considered themselves superior to ordinary people, and their pride was so great that they took her refusal as a personal insult and held a grudge. Not only the men, but also the women watching the couple's battle were envious of Arabel. They couldn't accept that, after getting their systems, they didn't become as beautiful as Arabel Morgan. Her changes were too noticeable and conspicuous. Even her charm had increased after changing her appearance. As the awakened ones watched the battle, the clash between the pair became more intense. Arabel began to gain the upper hand over the situation. The longer they fought, the stranger Arabel felt. At first, she didn't pay attention to it, but the longer they fought, the more a long-forgotten feeling of warmth and some feelings that she no longer hoped to return awoke in her. Arabel also noticed a change in the guy she was fighting with. If earlier there was only rage and determination in his eyes, now they showed not only that, but also the anticipation of something more. At first, Arabel tried to get rid of him and leave this place to sort out her feelings, but the guy stubbornly resisted her onslaught. Their battle had reached a new level. Almost all the spells and techniques they had learned during that time were used. In 2 years, Arabel had reached level 20, which was the maximum she could reach at the moment. And all the spells and techniques she used were honed to perfection. Even the wings on her back became a weapon with which she blocked the enemy's attacks. The longer and fiercer they fought, the more clearly they sensed each other. It was as if there was some kind of invisible connection between them, which grew stronger with each passing moment. Arabel's former aloofness began to fade, and her heart, which had almost stopped beating only a couple of times a minute, was now pounding like crazy. Her white skin took on a slightly more vibrant hue due to the accelerated rhythm of her blood. At the same time, the flames raging around the young man began to fade. The fury in his eyes dimmed, and his heart, which had been pounding nonstop, began to slow down. At that moment, both of them felt how their presence affected each other. It was as if the young man was the bonfire that melted Arabel's icy heart, and her presence, in turn, extinguished the fierce flame in the young man's heart. Arabel felt the young man's strength begin to wane. His attacks lost their power and speed, and his fiery wings stopped being supported. He fell to the ground, kneeling and breathing heavily. The flames around him went out, and it was clear that he had reached his limit. Arabel landed in front of him, but was in no hurry to interfere. She still couldn't figure out what was happening to her and why. And what role does this guy play in this? She noticed that his eyes had returned to normal, and they were no longer burning so fiercely. But she saw sadness and longing in those eyes. At that moment, she noticed the other awakened ones approaching them. Ahead of everyone, 3 people were rushing at great speed, who seemed to have decided to take advantage of the moment and attack the guy while he was weakened. Arabel didn't want to harm the guy, so she decided not to interfere. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them, she found herself standing behind the trio, who had almost reached the guy. Arabel slowly lowered the sword she was holding and saw the blood on it. It was only then that she realized that she hadn't even noticed how she made the move. And in the blink of an eye, she cut off the heads of 3 attackers before they could attack the guy. All the other awakened ones who were approaching them stopped abruptly and looked at her in surprise and fear. Arabel was confused herself. Why and how did this happen? And then she heard the voice of the system in her head, which she had become accustomed to over the years of becoming an awakened one. However, after listening carefully, she noticed that the system's voice was slightly different from what she was used to. Congratulations, host. The optimal state has been reached. The trials of the heart for ascension have been passed. The integration of the Ice Valkyrie bloodline begins. Ding, a bonus task is given. The goal of the bonus task is to survive as long as possible under the onslaught of the awakened ones. The value of the reward will depend on how long the host lasts. After the system's message, a wave of memories flashed through Arabel's mind. Her current thoughts and the memories she had before the trials began to mix. Finally, it dawned on her that all this was not reality, but a test. As she stood there in confusion, the other awakened ones had already begun to act and were now targeting her. But even before they could get close, a wave of flames suddenly erupted around her, which enveloped her and the guy. This flame was very similar to what the guy used when he destroyed the 7 highs. Arabel came to her senses and noticed that she was surrounded by flames that protected her from others. However, she immediately realized that this protection would not last long. Then she saw a young man with red hair who was no longer kneeling, but straightened up and looked at her with a slight smile on his face. "You know, I didn't expect you to be so ruthless, Arabel," he said. Arabel recognized his voice immediately, and although his appearance had changed slightly, he was still the one she knew. "And this new look suits you, Idan. I like the way you look. Especially your red hair," she said with a slight hint of embarrassment, then looked at her white hair and sighed softly with sadness. "You're fine too," Idan replied to Arabel's compliment. "That's it?" she asked, displeased with his words. Idan immediately detected a note of displeasure in her voice. "You look so beautiful, like a white flower that you just want to pick and make your own," he blurted out. But when he realized what he had said, he was very embarrassed. "What's wrong with my tongue? When did I learn such compliments?" he thought. Although Arabel had regained her memories, she still hadn't fully regained control of her emotions. After hearing Idan's compliment, she was so embarrassed that a blush appeared on her face. I assume you got a bonus task too?" Idan quickly changed the subject. "Yes," Arabel agreed, returning to her usual aloofness she had grown accustomed to during the ordeal. Then they both looked back, and the flames began to fade, revealing a crowd of awakened ones surrounding them both. "The very sight of them gives me the creeps," Idan commented upon seeing this terrifying scene in front of him. "Well, the system doesn't require us to survive, escape, or eliminate them all. All we need is to hold on for a while. So let's give it our all and do our best," replied Arabel, preparing for the upcoming battle. "Yeah, let's have some fun," said Idan with a grin on his face. Chapter 46. Izzy's future growth. It has been almost a month in limbo since Idan and Arabel began their ascension trial and the integration of new bloodlines. All this time, Eulalia and Nemo did not stop watching and guarding them. Milika visited them from time to time, checking on their condition, and sometimes left her house to strengthen the protective spells she had created. After the cocoons underwent drastic changes, there were no other changes other than a change in Nemo's behavior. At first, he meditated under Idan's cocoon, but 2 weeks later he moved under Arabel's cocoon. When Nemo was under Idan's cocoon, Milika began to suspect Idan's bloodline, which he was exposed to. She also wondered why the spirit inside Nemo tends to absorb the energy emitted by the cocoon. At first, Milica was puzzled because, as far as she knew, the spirit absorbs only the energy of its parent, whom she chose. Therefore, she expected that the spirit would only absorb Nemo's energy. However, despite this, the spirit greedily absorbed the energy coming from Idan. When Milica first found out about this, her face took on a strange expression. She began to think, will Izzy really consider Nemo and Idan her parents when she fully matures and overcomes her embryo stage? Imagining this, Milica quickly shook her head. No way. This can't be happening. She began to deny her strange and frightening fantasies. Then she began to look for an answer that could satisfy her curiosity and banish these thoughts from her mind. After studying Idan's condition and Nemo's existence, Milica came to the conclusion that Idan was probably awakening the alpha bloodline. Only alphas could match the bloodline of the Valkyries and compete with them on equal terms. And the fact that Izzy is so drawn to this energy is explained by the fact that the energy coming from the cocoon does not belong to anyone. It is the pure energy of the alpha bloodline. Milica was well aware that Nemo's sealed bloodline originated from the alpha bloodline. When she received an answer that satisfied her, she was finally able to get rid of her strange fantasies and relax. She couldn't accept that the spirit she revered as a child of nature would be born thanks to the energy of two young men. In 2 weeks, Izzy quickly absorbed the energy of Idan's bloodline, and then immediately switched to the energy emitted by Arabel's cocoon, which surprised Milica even more. No matter how much she thought, she couldn't find a reasonable explanation for this phenomenon. Nemo also didn't understand why Izzy had switched to this energy. Izzy herself claimed that the energy emanating from Arabel's cocoon is unique and attracts her in the same way as the energy of Idan's cocoon. Even after absorbing enough of the energy of Idan's cocoon, she was still attracted to the energy emitted by Arabel's cocoon. Nemo couldn't help but obey the little spirit's demand. He didn't understand how he had managed to form a symbiotic contract with Izzy. When he came to his senses inside Limbo, Izzy was already by his side. At first, Nemo hoped that Izzy knew who he was, because he hadn't remembered anything since he woke up. But contrary to his expectations, Izzy didn't know anything either. She also came to her senses inside Limbo. At first, Nemo hid Izzy's presence because both he and she understood that she was a unique being. But when Milica noticed him and saved him from the outsiders who enslaved him when he was unconscious, she immediately sensed Izzy's presence. In the end, Milica became his mentor and told him who the spirits were. From her words, Nemo learned that spirits are unique creatures born of nature itself. At birth, they are a tiny bundle of light and soul that instinctively seeks a parent in order to establish a symbiotic contract with him. Milica was amazed when Izzy's spirit chose Nemo as her parent. She had never heard of spirits choosing intelligent beings as their parents before. Nemo was also puzzled by the word parent. Milica briefly explained to him what was going on. The spirit establishes a symbiotic contract with the chosen being in order to move on to the next stage of its cultivation, the embryo stage. At this stage, the spirit will coexist with its parent as a single whole. Through the contract, the spirit acquires its identity based on the identity of its parent and inherits all of his memories. Milica assumed that Izzy doesn't remember anything because Nemo most likely signed a contract with her after he lost his memory. Because of this, Izzy was unable to inherit his memories and knowledge, and gained only her pure and innocent personality. Due to the fact that she has signed a contract with Nemo, she has already begun to form a personality similar to a small human child who learns and develops quickly. Now that she was absorbing the energy of Idan and Arabel, her cultivation speed increased many times. At this rate, Izzy will soon move on to the next stage of her cultivation. Remembering this stage, Milica couldn't help but smile. The next stage was called birth. The spirit was completely transformed into the race of its parent and transformed into a newborn of that race. Milica had not yet heard of a spirit being born with the help of an intelligent being, so she had no ideas about this. She only scared Nemo by saying that at this rate he would soon become a father. Nemo was stunned and couldn't believe his ears. He wanted to stop Izzy immediately so that she would stop absorbing energy. After all, he wasn't ready to become a father yet, especially since they hadn't even left limbo. However, Izzy stubbornly stood her ground and demanded that Nemo allow her to continue absorbing energy. She assured him that sooner or later it would happen, and the sooner she moved on to the next stage, the sooner she could become useful to him. In the end, Nemo gave up. Milica and Eulalia, seeing his helplessness, couldn't help but smile. They themselves wanted to see the birth of a spirit from a being like Nemo. After a month of silence, both cocoons in which Idan and Arabel were imprisoned began to throb more strongly. Cracks appeared on their surfaces, foreshadowing their imminent awakening. Chapter 47, Transformation to the Ice Valkyrie. Arabel woke up in a state of complete confusion. Her mind was in chaos, and she couldn't figure out where she was. The first thing she saw in front of her was someone being forcibly pushed out of the room. Besides her, there were only two people in the room, Milica and Eulalia. The one who was kicked out turned out to be Nemo. The reason for his exile was obvious. When Arabel came out of the cocoon, she was naked, and the women, noticing this, immediately asked Nemo to check Idan's room. Arabel finally realized that she was on the second floor of Milica's house. Only then did she pay attention to her body, and she noticed that she was standing naked and felt embarrassed, despite the fact that there were only Milica and Eulalia in front of her. She was surprised that the body remained the same as during the trial. Her entire skin was white, and her long red hair had turned into long white. However, there was also a difference, the presence of two pairs of wings. Unlike the trial, these wings seemed to be an integral part of her being, rather than appearing due to an ability she possessed during the trial. Surprisingly, they weren't made of ice or snow, but of a strange white fur, creating a strange sensation. "You are simply amazing, Arabel," said Milica admiringly, coming forward and carefully examining the changes in Arabel's appearance. She was amazed by the beauty of her appearance and felt the clear presence of the Ice Valkyrie bloodline in her. Eulalia was also watching Arabel with interest and admiration. For Milica, being able to observe Valkyrie so closely was a real temptation, especially considering that this new Valkyrie was an acquaintance of hers, which only increased her joy. She couldn't wait to find out what the Valkyries were capable of, and especially her new acquaintance. "Ding, congratulations, host, on your ascension. The restriction on level-ups has been lifted." Ding. The integration of the Ice Valkyrie bloodline has been completed successfully. A new feature of the system, Bloodlines, is available. Acquired the new ability, Transformation to the Ice Valkyrie. A new path has been opened, the Path of Bloodline. Due to the integration of the bloodline, some abilities and skills related to the Path of Magic and Path of Sword have been adjusted and removed. Ding. As a reward for completing the bonus task, and thanks to the integration of the Ice Valkyrie bloodline, the system level has been upgraded to 20th, which is the maximum for this stage. The Ascension test is not available. Access to the test will be possible after removing the second seal. Arabel listened to the system's messages, confused. The trial had already confused her thoughts so much, and now she was bombarded with so much information that she couldn't think clearly and make sense of it all. She decided to review all the details later, when she came to her senses and was in a better mood. However, despite all this, the name of one ability in particular caught Arabel's attention. It was the Transformation to the Ice Valkyrie. The ability, Transformation to the Ice Valkyrie, allows its owner to awaken the bloodline of the Ice Valkyrie and transform into her race. Currently, the host is already in the state of the Ice Valkyrie. The host can undo the transformation at any time and return to his original race and form. Ding! At the moment, the Ice Valkyrie's bloodline is at a stable level. Synchronization with the Ice Valkyrie form is 30%. The host is strongly advised to increase synchronization as much as possible to avoid the risk of rebellion and completely subjugate the bloodline. Before Arabel could ask her question, the system, as usual, got ahead of her and explained everything. Realizing that she could regain her former appearance, including her red hair, Arabel felt joy and immediately decided to reverse the transformation. As soon as she did, her snow-white skin began to regain its natural color, her height decreased slightly, and her long white hair turned back to its familiar shade of red. Milica and Eulalia, who were watching these amazing changes, were amazed and puzzled. Just now, an ice valkyrie, a representative of the superior race, was standing in front of them, but suddenly she disappeared, and in her place was a familiar Arabel with long red hair. Arabel ignored the pair of mentor and disciple, her gaze fixed on the long white scarf she was holding in her hands. Two pairs of her snow-white wings, after she reversed the transformation, turned into a long white scarf. He was so soft and fluffy that Arabel hugged him to her and sighed softly. Even after all the changes were cancelled, she continued to feel an inextricable connection with this scarf, as if she were an integral part of it. "How amazing," said Milika, also paying attention to this scarf. She appeared next to Arabel and gently touched him. Arabel suddenly shuddered, as if Milika had touched not the scarf, but herself. Watching Arabel's reaction, Milika became convinced of her assumptions. "You need to take care of him carefully, Arabel. For Valkyrie, wings are not only a way to fly and a weapon for battles, but also a source of their power. Every time the Valkyries descend from their celestial continent, they take on the appearance of ordinary mortals, and their wings, like your scarf, can transform into any accessory they wish." Arabel was amazed by this discovery and was very happy that she now has such a scarf. She had completely forgotten that she had been standing without clothes all this time. A knock on the door brought her and the others out of their reverie. It was only then that Arabel remembered her nakedness. She hurried to bed and hid under the covers before the door opened and Nemo and Idan entered the room. Idan had already managed to get dressed and now looked as usual, with short black hair. His appearance was strikingly different from what it was during the trial. "Oh, did you come out of your cocoon too?" argued Milika, looking at Idan. "Yes," Idan replied, nodding his head. "She awakened the bloodline of the Ice Valkyrie, and you apparently awakened the bloodline of the Alpha of Fire, didn't you?" Milika didn't beat around the bush, asking Idan a direct question. "You're right, Miss Milika," Idan confirmed her guess. "I wonder if you can hide your bloodline too. One of you has awakened the bloodline of the Ice Valkyries, and the other has awakened the bloodline of the Alpha of Fire. It's so exciting. I really want to explore you both." Milika's eyes shone with curiosity and expectation. "That's it, I've made a decision. How would you like to become my direct disciples?" Huh. 4 pairs of eyes stared at Milika at the same time, expressing surprise. Chapter 48. Master and disciples. During her time in Limbo, Milika taught many disciples, but she never accepted any of them as her personal disciple. For representatives of the higher race, to which Milika belongs, the adoption of a personal disciple can be compared to adoption. Eulalia and Nemo were just Milika's ordinary disciples, not personal ones. Even Eulalia, being an elf, couldn't boast of a special status. Milika made no exceptions, regardless of race. Ignorant people might think that Milika and Eulalia belonged to the same race, but those who were familiar with Magelia politics and the higher races knew that they belonged to 2 different worlds. When Eulalia heard Milika's offer to take Idan and Arabel as personal disciples, she was more surprised than the others. Along with surprise came envy. Eulalia longed for Milika to accept her as a disciple, but she couldn't express it openly. Biting her lower lip, she lowered her head, hiding her feelings of disappointment and envy. Of course, Milika couldn't help but notice this. She understood perfectly well how Eulalia felt at that moment. Nemo, hiding his face behind a mask, silently watched what was happening. Idan and Arabel, not being familiar with the culture of this world, still had a rough idea of what it meant to be a personal disciple of a being like Milika. They looked at each other in surprise, and then, remembering that they could communicate through a mental link, they quickly exchanged a few words and agreed that they were both okay with the proposal. "Miss Milika, do you understand that we are from another world? And even knowing that, do you want to take us on as personal disciples?" asked Arabel. "Of course. If we were in the outside world, I would have thought before making such an offer. But here in Limbo, we're all in the same boat. We still have to find a way out. And I don't want to miss this opportunity," Milika replied without hesitation. "What does it mean to be a personal disciple?" asked Idan. "This is an interesting question. I can't tell you exactly how your world works or what it means to be a personal disciple in it. In our world, being a personal disciple is almost like recognizing your master as a second parent. It means accepting the protection of your master and inheriting all his knowledge and legacy, explained Milika. Well, it's not that much different from what we assumed. In many fictional stories that we read in our world, being a personal disciple means something similar, Idan said. Are you really sure about this? What if we become enemies of your world in the future? Asked Arabel. Without waiting for an answer, she hastened to add, trying to soften the situation. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to say that we are against your world. We don't even know what he looks like. This is the first time we came to this world and ended up here. We can't promise that this won't happen. It's better to be prepared for the worst in advance. Yes, I understand what you mean, but I am convinced of my words. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't interested in your world. However, right now, I'm not worried that you might become enemies of our world in the future. Even if this happens, and you have a good reason for it, as long as our beliefs do not contradict each other, I, as your master, will support you and take your side, said Milika confidently. By becoming my disciples, you will receive my protection, and I will personally teach you how to use magic. You will also be able to use my name and openly say that you are my personal disciples. I will not limit your actions, but I will not turn a blind eye to any atrocities that you commit. And what will you get from us? Asked Arabel. What kind of stupid question is that? Of course, the two of you. You both have unprecedented potential, which I admire. You're hiding a lot of secrets. The blood of the two highest races of our world flows in your veins. And if in the future you become so strong that you surpass me, then I will be proud to have two powerful disciples who, I hope, will not forget their master, Milika said with a smile, listing not all the advantages that she expects from accepting Idan and Arabel into her disciple family. In the short time they had spent together, Milika had already been able to appreciate the potential of this couple. She wasn't afraid that they would return to their own world as soon as they left Limbo. For some reason, Milika was sure that their connection to their world would last for a long time. And if she's lucky, she might get a chance to visit their world in the future, taking advantage of their connection. Milika did not want to miss such a unique opportunity. Idan and Arabel discussed all the details among themselves once more. Once in the new world, both were on their guard and constantly in a state of suspicion. They did not want to unconditionally believe the inhabitants of this world, always expecting betrayal and other insidious actions. However, as it turned out, they needlessly worried about the possible danger when it came to these three. Despite their caution, they were deeply grateful to Milika and the others for their invaluable help. They didn't know how to thank them for that. Nemo saved them and taught them how to fight with swords. Eulalia, in turn, taught them the basics of magic and always accompanied them when they left the city. She never showed discontent or aggression towards them, but was genuinely happy to help and look after them. In all these days, they had never noticed a single shadow of falsehood or pretense in Eulalia. Milika provided them with a safe haven and taught them how to cook dishes that helped them complete the tasks of the system. By the way she met them after the trial, they realized that she had been by their side and taking care of them all this time. Thanks to the system, Idan and Arabel realized that Milika was a powerful being. If she wanted to harm them or find out their secrets, she wouldn't have taken so long and diligently sought their trust before striking. As a result, the couple decided to trust her. Even if Milika had some hidden plans against them, it would be their own mistake, because they had allowed her to ingratiate herself with them. Okay, we are happy to accept your offer and are ready to become your disciples. Idan and Arabel agreed at the same time. Milika was delighted with their agreement and was glad that she had convinced the couple to join her. In a great mood, she turned her gaze to Nemo and Eulalia, who were quietly watching what was happening. Eulalia, Nemo, how about you two? I know that you get along well with Idan and Arabel, and most likely, you will soon be working together in search of a way out of Limbo. I'm also willing to accept the two of you as my personal disciples if that's what you want. After hearing Milika's suggestion, Eulalia couldn't hold back her tears. All this time, she was listening and envious of the couple. She knew that she was not worthy of being her personal disciple because of her bloodline, but still, deep down, she hoped that Milika would offer her this honor. And finally, her dream came true. She couldn't contain her joy. Nemo stood rooted to the spot, and it was unclear what was going on in his head. After a few seconds, Nemo nodded his head, agreeing to Milika's suggestion. Milika was very pleased to see how her disciples, whom she accepted in this godforsaken place, agreed to become her personal disciples. Then she looked at her 4 future disciples and couldn't help but smile. At that moment, she was overcome by a strange feeling, as if she had made one of the most important and correct choices in her life. "So, from today on, the 4 of you will become my personal disciples," Milika said solemnly. "Yes, Master," the 3 of them exclaimed in unison and bowed low, recognizing her as their mentor. Nemo just followed his companions in silence. "That's great. Eulalia, you will be the eldest," said Milika, addressing Eulalia. At that moment, Eulalia was surprised, but very glad that she was recognized as a senior disciple. "Nemo, you will be the second oldest," Milika addressed Nemo. He nodded, indicating that he understood. "And as for you," Milika did not know which of the pair to choose as the 3rd disciple. "Please, ladies, go ahead." Before she could make a decision, Idan pushed Arabel, encouraging her to become the 3rd. "Good. Then, Arabel, you will become my 3rd personal disciple, and Idan the 4th, Milika said, making a decision. "With pleasure," everyone agreed. And so, in a small estate located in the 3rd city called Usuria, in the territory of Limbo, a bond was born between the master and his disciples. This place was hidden from most of the inhabitants of the outside world, but it was here that what was to shake the foundations of this world in the future originated. Chapter 49. System intervention for Idan and Arabel. Milika's recognition as their master was unexpected, but at the same time, a pleasant surprise. Now they had people they could trust and feel comfortable in their company. After a short exchange of words, Milika and the others left Idan and Arabel alone. They still hadn't recovered from the trial and needed time to recover. Idan also returned to his room and, sitting down on the bed, closed his eyes, trying to figure out what had happened. The trial was not at all what he had expected. Many things happened during it, and the echoes of these events still continued to torment his mind. He didn't want to think about it. Towards the end of the trial, when he had almost exhausted all his strength in the fight against Arabel, seized by a strange attraction to her, both of his memories merged together and began to contradict each other. He couldn't figure out what was true and what was a dream. Unlike Arabel, who almost abandoned her emotions and did not experience a strong shock after combining the 2 memories, Idan was trapped by his violent feelings. During the trial, he could barely contain the rage that occasionally erupted in his mind. He could only smile bitterly, realizing the predicament he was in. He needed time to suppress his emotions and accept himself as he is now. After calming down a bit, he looked at his status. Status name, Idan Fane gender, male age, 19 years old race, human partner, Arabel Morgan affection 41%, path of cultivation, system host system, supreme husband system, synchronized with supreme wife system, system rarity, epic, plus, unique feature 1, titles supreme, partially sealed, unavailable, required qualifications, unique feature 2. The paired system, exchange of characteristics, currently 40%, unavailable main stats. Level 20 strength, 187. Stamina, 193 dexterity, 184 intelligence, 240 mana, 305 abilities. Mental connection, plus. Mental connection. Arabel Morgan cutting LVL2 cooking LVL2 functions. Trade, plus. Bloodlines, plus. After integrating the Alpha Fire bloodline, Idan was surprised to find that his race hadn't changed. Instead, a new line, Bloodlines, appeared in the list of system functions with a plus sign next to it. Clicking on this plus sign, Idan opened an additional window where he saw the following. Bloodlines. Human main, gold rank. 83% Alpha Fire Sync, secondary, gold rank. 40%, unavailable new bloodline slot is unavailable. To gain access, buy a slot from the Supreme Bloodline system for system points using the system's trade function. "What the hell?" exclaimed Idan, looking at the 3rd slot in the Bloodline line. The new Bloodline integration slot is unavailable. To get it, the host needs to buy it from the Supreme Bloodline system for system points. As always, the system came to the rescue. But this time, instead of giving an explanation, she just repeated what had already been written. "Ah, system, I can read. That's not what I meant at all. Does this mean that if we buy a slot, we can get other bloodlines in the future, and with them, the ability to transform? Yes, was the system's simple response. Host, the system strongly recommends against attempting to integrate the new bloodline at this time. First of all, it is necessary to fully integrate with the Alpha Fire bloodline. Due to the unique nature of the bloodline integration through the Ascension trial, both hosts experienced different versions of their lives during the trial. As a result, at the end of the trial, both personalities have merged into one, and the host needs to combine them into a single whole. Otherwise, another person may start fighting for their rights and harm the main personality. Currently, the second personality is already influencing the main one, and the level of synchronization between them has dropped to 83%. The system also advises avoiding frequent transformations into the Alpha of Fire until both personalities are fully synchronized. What do you mean, system? Do I have a split personality? Asked Idan in disbelief. Not at the moment. The host is currently suffering from the effects of the fusion of two personalities. If the host cannot handle this properly, it is possible for a second personality to be born based on the personality from the trial, and then the host will have a split personality. Oh no, it's not funny at all, Idan cursed. He didn't know what was the right thing to do in this situation. He could feel his emotions in chaos. Images from the trials surfaced in his mind, clouding his mind, trying to replace his real memories. Ever since he returned to his room, his heart had been racing, showing no sign of calming down. Idan was well aware that this was the influence of his bloodline. As he understood it, the Alphas of Fire were too emotional and short-tempered. They were always on edge and almost never tired. Idan tried to calm down by closing his eyes and taking deep breaths. Gradually, his mind cleared up, and he began to recall the events that had happened to him during the trial. He remembered how he had awakened during the trial and activated his Alpha Fire system. At that moment, he was desperate and hiding like a rat in the dark corners of the Federation capital, among the homeless. He didn't know what to do, and he cursed all the awakened ones, the powerful families, and even the Federation itself. Idan wanted revenge on those who had harmed his family and himself. However, he understood that with his current strength, he couldn't change anything. And so, when his despair reached its limit, he heard a voice. Ding, the ideal user has been found. Synchronization with the Alpha Life System begins. 1% ding, error, external interference detected error. Idan, whose personality then heard this voice of the system, could not understand what was going on. His mind went blank and he closed his eyes. But after a few seconds, he reopened them. What's going on? Where am I? Said Idan, opening his eyes. Ding, host, the system intervened in the Ascension test process. A potential danger related to your partner has been identified. She was able to awaken the bloodline of the Ice Valkyrie. The system could have intervened in this, but having assessed the situation, this did not do it. Your partner's heart is perfectly compatible with the bloodline of the Ice Valkyrie. Idan heard the familiar voice of his system, and it was the real Idan, not the one who was in the trial. After assessing the situation and figuring out the bloodline variant that the host had awakened, the system decided to step in. To ensure the safety of your partner and protect her from the harmful effects of her bloodline, the system recommends that the host choose the opposite bloodline of the Ice Valkyrie, the bloodline of the Alpha of Fire. Idan still couldn't figure out what was going on. However, after hearing that Arabel was in danger and in order to help her, the system asked him to choose a different bloodline, he agreed without hesitation. Idan realized that the system could have changed his bloodline without his consent, but she decided to ask his permission before interfering. This decision amazed Idan and strengthened his trust in the system. So Idan himself abandoned the bloodline of the Alpha of Life, choosing the bloodline of the Alpha of Fire. And now, he is experiencing the consequences of this choice, trying to contain his raging emotions.